This is Atlas Thugged. As much as we have, it's currently a media blackout right now. It's about a 10-minute video here. Get the libertarians out of this party, dude. Part of a new series I'm going to be running called Bot or Not.
I grew up as a white man, and you're the exact opposite, you know?
It's time we have a difficult conversation about race.
40 IQ points it needs to think about what is being told to you.
Most people are just blatantly apathetic to what goes on around in their surroundings, let alone just blatantly.
A trans woman's penis make you gay?
Can I decline to answer that comment?
The dating market is for men your age.
I'm not a misogynist. I'm a sexist.
Right, like for example, like as a white man, I can go out and I could go right here in Columbus and scream the N-word as loud as I wanted to because I have that privilege. Those who would sacrifice a little freedom for a little convenience serves neither.
Titan says, Browns should be for whites. We were just trying to help them run a better empire.
Hey, truth.
But she's straight up, she's like, stock market. She's like, bro, like, I can't even buy a fucking house. Like,
And probably doesn't help that half the comments are, "How are you not banned on YouTube? Man, how is this guy? How is this guy not banned on YouTube?" It's like, yeah, I'm sure YouTube probably picks up on those things, and they're probably wondering why so many people are saying that,
and all these top brass pundits who have some kind of association or relationship with Epstein, it's getting to the point where you got to think like I'm about to go look at my residential history and be like, did I live next to Epstein for like some time? Like, man, everyone on this planet must have some relation to Epstein. And then you go, oh, actually, no. This is because the administration is all wrapped in together with it themselves.
and I said this maybe about a year ago. What if Christianity wasn't in such a cucked position that what if Andrew Tate, like Tristan, would have went to a Christian position? Fell for it again award, #1 right here. And you know what? I can't even make fun of the audience because I fell for it too. And that's probably what I'm most pissed about. He's huffing some extreme copium. Oh yeah, sister, you definitely owned him. Hey, can I see you after tonight? It's like that's that's what you're competing up against because or bad jacketing him and calling him a weird little gay.
Is this like alt-right Colt's husband? What am I listening
Yeah.
Okay, stop it. This guy's gonna get into statistics, stuff like that.
Oh, no, statistics, not
So-
on the show. We
so-
don't do statistics.
Hello and welcome in to another episode of Offensively Accurate, hosted by yours truly, Atlas Thug. And joining me today is a guest that I have been waiting to have on for a very long time. Someone I've followed for years now at this point, I think since 2020 and maybe even before that. someone who spoke a lot of truth to me about some issues as it relates to marriage, as it relates to transgenderism, and as a whole, just our kind of current situation and postulation and positioning as American men in this current system, what America is. So without further ado, thank you very much for joining me, Jeff Younger. Who are you and what do you do?
Well, hey, I'm really glad to be here because I also follow you on X, and you're one of my favorite accounts. And I tell everyone, I have the absolute best followers on X. I mean, honestly, I tell people, and I hate to sound like I'm gloating, but I have over 10,000 people blocked. Like I'm not writing for a general audience. So if you go through my follower list and you're on the right, it is a gold mine of people to follow, and you're right at the top of it.
Well, I appreciate that very much.
Well, yeah, man, no worries. So who am I? Well, I'm just a normal dad. I'm an applied mathematician. And the system tried to transgender my son. And so I went to war against it. And I'm still going to war against it. And I've used the weapons available to me, which have not been the conventional weapons that are used in a battle like this. And I've taken some scalps. I've got some laws passed in the states to protect kids. Ultimately, my son was chemically castrated, but I'm still shutting down gender clinics. Whenever he goes into gender clinics, I shut it down. So I believe in fighting these battles asymmetrically. I have a whole point of view on that stuff. And through this process, when they're trying to kill your son, I've developed a completely new point of view on American politics, American society, masculinity, even religion.
Well, that is a robust introduction. And I think that's one of the things I admire about you is you are one of these guys who are extremely intelligent. You can just kind of tell when someone speaks just from the language they use, the vocabulary. You can tell when somebody's a cut above. And I appreciate that, especially in a sea of, I guess you would say, a lot of reactive content, a lot of like lowbrow, kind of like low IQ content that serves its purpose, but ultimately I think it's not ultimately substantive. But one thing that I want to address too, which I think people would probably want to know as well, through this journey, you're kind of at the end tail of dealing with the court aspect and starting a new court case where you are not going to be dealing or paying the child support they're demanding you of that will ultimately go to the medical costs towards your son. So kind of give us what are you up against, right? It seems like you said you had 2 years prison sentence, what you're facing.
Yeah, I mean, it's really simple. The position of the family courts in all 50 states, even states that have outlawed the transgender stuff, the position in all these states is that transing a kid, castrating a kid, little boy, that's medical child support. They're saying I have to pay for that. Well, they can just go fuck themselves. Okay, I'm not going to pay to hurt my kid. And I laid out 3 principles for myself when I started having to deal with this. If you go out on YouTube and you search for "mommy says I'm a girl," you'll see the first iPhone video I ever took. It's just my son telling me that his mom says he's a girl. So that week, I laid out what the 3 principles I would follow here as I went through this. And the first one was I would never hurt my son. Second one was I would never morally miseducate my son. And the third one was I would never let my resources be used to hurt my son. So they're trying to force resources through child support to castrate my boy. And, they're just not going to get that from me. So I'm not going to do that. So the penalty in both California and Texas is roughly the same. It's 2 years in prison. It's considered child abandonment. But you can also spend pretty much the rest of your life in prison on criminal contempt. They'll put you in jail for contempt of court and then let you out for 6 months and then put you back in jail for a year. And you just do that for the rest of your life. So it's probably going to be some combination of, contempt and sitting in prison on a criminal charge. In Texas, it's called a jail felony, which means you can either go to prison or you can be in a county jail for the lockup. In California, it's a prison offense.
And the one thing that you had said, just before we had went live that really took it up another level to me was, as I've been following this, I kind of assumed that they would be chasing the child custody in California. But as you would let me know, there's a lot of convolution and greasy palms happening between state lines, and they're actually going to be pursuing that in Texas against you.
That's right. Yeah. So the way my wife got to California is very instructive because it's something new I had never seen before, and I don't think a lot of people even know about it. Liberal state judges are colluding across state lines to move children and to create rulings across state lines, even to one, prevent an interstate controversy so you can't get into federal court, and two, to achieve the outcome in whichever state they can get. And it's not just child support, it's not just family court issues, lots of other issues that are related to the leftist agenda. But in my case, I had a leftist judge. Her name is Mary Brown. I call her Judge Bloody Mary Brown.
Yeah.
She's in you're going to find that I name people's names.
Yeah.
She's in the 301st District Court. And in America, truth is an absolute defense against defamation. None of these people ever sue me because I can prove I'm telling the truth.
Right.
Judge Bloody Mary Brown allowed my ex-wife to move my son to California after I passed a law here in Texas, which outlawed the practices. So in order to get my son chemically castrated, she had to leave the state. So the judge did this. They did this through a pretext. So the judge said that I was violating the gag order. I was put under a gag order. So you're going to have lawyers that say this isn't true, but I've had many lawyers look at the gag order online. You can go see videos of it.
Yeah.
And the lawyers all fall out of their chair. They can't believe a judge ordered it. So I was actually prevented from doing any podcasts, writing any newspaper articles, writing any books, doing any videos. This is a lifetime ban. Doing any audio podcasts, doing any newspaper interviews. So I was essentially given a lifetime ban from all media. Then it bans me from talking about 3 political topics: transgenderism, gender expansiveness, and whether my sons are boys or girls. So that gag order was passed and put on me by Judge Bloody Mary Brown when I was running for office in the state of Texas. So they put that gag order on me full well knowing that I couldn't follow it because I'm running for office.
That's wild. So you just broke it anyways.
Yeah, exactly. So when I did violate the gag order, they brought me into court and they said, well, Mr. Younger, this is literally how the judge reasoned. The illegal gag order was entered in the best interest of your children. You're not following the illegal gag order. Therefore, you're not acting in the best interest of your children. And so now you're going to be put on supervised visitation. So you see the principle, the way the family court works is they create the conditions in which you can't follow an order.
Yeah.
And then use your disobedience to the order to further take your parental rights.
And take it as like an assessment of your character too, right? Use it as a character assessment of you.
100%. So then they gave me supervised visitation with forensic counseling services in Dallas. And this is a bunch of gay and transgender counselors. And they refused in the visits to let me take my son out of address, to use his real name, or even to pray with them. So I could not attend these visits because, again, my second principle was I will never morally miseducate my son. So I'm not going to use a fake girl's name for him, and I'm not going to put him in a dress, okay? I'm just not going to do it.
Right.
So I didn't go to the supervised visitations. So they created an order that I couldn't follow, and they full well knew I couldn't follow. And then I've disobeyed the order. So they bring me back into court again. And they say, well, Mr. Younger, since we gave you an illegal counseling order that required you to violate your conscience, your religious conscience, and you didn't, and that order was entered in the best interest of the children, and you didn't follow the illegal order that was entered in the best interest of your children, that means that you are not acting in the best interest of your children again. And on that basis, we're going to let your ex-wife move to California. You see how they stage it?
Yeah.
So she moves to California. And that happened 30 days after California passed the transgender kidnapping bill. So that means California will never repatriate my child back to Texas because I passed the law outlawing it here.
Yeah.
They will not repatriate a transgender child back to a state that has outlawed what they call affirming care. So then I entered into negotiations with the law firm. The law firm is Coons Fuller, and the lawyer is Jessica Janicek. Entered into good faith negotiations with her. And I said, look, she's already moved to California. In 6 months, they can move the case there anyway. Right. Under the UCC JEA, which is a joint law that all the states have passed. once the children are in another state, you can move the case there. So I negotiated some favorable terms and moved the case to California, hoping to at least get a second trial, right? I mean, it couldn't be worse than what was happening already.
Right.
He's already going to be chemically castrated in California. So I did get a second trial in California, and that was under Judge Mark Uhats
Yeah.
in LA Superior Court. He's Department 63.
You call him
63 or
Judas?
65. Say again?
You call him Judas? What was your name for him?
Yeah, Judge Judas. Yeah, Judge Judas. And the reason I called him that was the very first thing he did is he denied me an independent medical exam of my own son, denied me an independent psychological exam, and told the other side they didn't have to provide me any evidence. And you know, when you go into a trial, you get evidence from the other side. It's called discovery. It's a law.
Right.
And he said, no, they don't have to give you anything. So they got thousands of pages and videos and recordings of me in discovery, and all my tax returns and everything has been made public, everything. And they didn't have to give me one piece of paper, and they didn't give me any evidence. So I went into trial with no evidence and no independent psychological or medical exam of my son. And then I proceeded in the trial to prove beyond any doubt that my ex-wife had fabricated a medical and psychological history of my son in order to put him into the gender clinic in LA Children's Hospital. I proved it beyond a doubt. I showed absolutely contradictory testimony in documents. So it's not even based on verbal testimony.
And she's a pediatrician, correct?
She's a pediatrician. Yeah, she's a pediatrician. Yeah. And she transits kids in California. That's what she does. The judge then said, it looked bad. The facts look very bad, right? The judge is like, how is he going to rule for my ex-wife? So he said, you know what? I'm not going to rule on whether these procedures are good or bad for James. I'm just going to rule on what parent is best able to make medical decisions. And of course, she's a pediatrician. And that's how he made his ruling, and just said, well, I'm just going to give her all medical authority. And then he made my supervised visitation even worse. So now she is under no obligation to give my letters that I write to my son to them. He said I cannot use any photos of my son, but I can use their names. And he said that she has no duty to notify me of any medical or educational issues whatsoever. And even my phone calls have to be supervised, which costs about $1,000. Every phone call is $1,000.
$1,000.
So, yeah. So the reality is that, I haven't been able to see my sons for over 3 years now. And I won't see my sons until they're 18. That's just the reality.
And for one, I feel for you. I think I want to say it again because I might have said that in the green room. People probably know this too. I'm also from a similar situation where I'm also not in my son's life, and ultimately, a lot of what you had said and spoken about helped carry me through a lot of those periods there. And just like the Seaward Cheddar here also says, this is from Punished Mav. He says, Jeff, you were key for me converting to Orthodoxy, which we will get into in a little bit later on. But a lot of the stuff there, one thing that I wanted to talk to you about there too is it sounds like your wife is actively doing this to other children, probably behind other parents' backs too.
Yeah, I do actually have had parents approach me when she was still practicing in Texas, saying that she was pushing their children to transgenderism behind their back. Yeah. So, and that's legal, by the way. So we should talk about this. It's perfectly legal in all the 50 states for doctors to do that. It's actually legal for any licensed care provider, including a teacher, to do it. So all the 50 states, there's an exception that's put forth for licensed care providers. And it says that, and here's what it was originally intended for. If a child makes an outcry of abuse, they didn't want to require the care provider to tell the parent that they had made an outcry of abuse, right? They wanted to be able to handle that with the police or CPS without telling the parent. That was the concept behind it. What it's being used for now is a child will go to school, and they did this to my son for a year. I bring my son to school in boys' clothes. The teacher would change him into a dress and make him use the girls' restroom, and then change him back into boys' clothes when I pick him up. And that was to hide it from me, right? And the principal there was Christy Mickelson, and it was at Pinkerton Elementary in Coppell, Texas. Again, I name names.
Yep.
And they fought tooth and nail to be able to do this to my son. And I lost all the grievances that I filed against the school district. And back then, it was virtually impossible to sue a school district because in Texas, they have immunity. They have sovereign immunity like the state. And so you have to get their permission to sue them, which they're not going to grant you, right?
That's
so
wild.
This last session in Texas, we finally got a bill passed that removes sovereign immunity from school districts when they abuse children.
Good.
That's literally just how bad it is. So in all this 50 states, they use that exception to say, well, I'm not going to tell the parent that this child is transgender, and I'm going to push them into transgender and affirm them as the opposite sex and miseducate them. And I'm going to do it under this fact that I don't have to notify the parent. And so it's perfectly legal in all states. We've given way too much power to psychologists, doctors, and teachers.
But there's no way that it's outlined that way, right? There's no way, because that seems like it's too obvious almost, that it would be outlined that the school has an ability to decide for kids behind parents' backs, certain things. Like that seems insane. So is there like some kind of guise or rule set that falls under that they get special protections they can do this for?
It's these laws in the states that allow care providers to not notify parents of statements that children make. And it was intended for outcries of abuse, but they're applying it to other things now. In fact,
see.
They were using a girl's name for my son, and in their reply to my first grievance to the Capel Independent School District in Texas, they said that under their nicknames policy, they could call him a girl's name. So they'll apply any policy that they have to get your kids. There's literally only one answer to this, and frankly, right-wing conservative parents are in denial about this. But if your kids are in public school, you are not on the right and you're not conservative. This is all there is to it. You're a liberal.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't raise your kids to have your values in a public school.
And this is part of the issue as a whole, which is part of the reason why even currently right now, the right wing is on the verge of blowing up again, shortly after victory, is because you have a section of the right that is begging that the mainstream version of it move to a more actual right wing position and not be this kind of speed bump, as everybody calls it. The crazy thing there too, that you had said as well, which it blows me away that there was not an immediate of, hey, there's a conflict of interest. Maybe we shouldn't use this woman who's a pediatrician, her own notes and writings and medical evaluations of her own son. Maybe we should get a third party pediatrician in there. Did that ever happen, or was that a request by you?
Yeah, definitely. And she did that. And so what happens is the doctors will not refute another doctor. And so they just, in practice, just say whatever she tells them to say. There's a pediatrician right in my hometown here, Flower Mound, Texas. She practices at a clinic called 18 and Under MD. Her name is Dr. Jennifer Pape. She diagnosed my son with gender dysphoria. Now, the American Academy of Pediatrics says there's 3 criteria for that. It has to be consistent, insistent, and persistent. Okay. Yeah. So my son never presented as a girl with me. Okay. I'd go pick him up from his mom's house. He came out of his mom's house in boys' clothes. So we know he's comfortable in boys' clothes at his mom's house. He would come to me, live with me, and never presented as a girl at all. In fact, he's an extremely talented boxer. But that's probably not in his future now, but I mean, extremely talented boxer. Like we had people offering private tutors so he could just box full time.
That's awesome.
He could have come in the Olympics. He's that good.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And so, consistent, insistent, and persistent. Is it consistent? No, because he doesn't present as a girl with me. Is it insistent? No, because he's perfectly happy wearing boys' clothes even at his mom's house. Is it persistent? No, because it comes and goes depending on who he's with. So it didn't meet any of the diagnostic criteria. Jennifer Pape just said, look, I'm not going to contradict this other pediatrician, diagnosed my son with gender dysphoria. And when I pointed out to her that he doesn't meet any of the diagnostic criteria, she said, well, I'm using my clinical experience to make this judgment. And I said, well, what is your clinical experience with transgender children? And she said, none. So what that means is pediatricians have just decided they can just make shit up and tell you how to raise your kids.
That certainly seems to be what it sounds like, you know. And I remember reading some of the notes that you had posted there as well. And you know, and I was wholeheartedly behind your decision too, especially as it came to like your stance on the child support as well. Like, I'm not going to hand over money that's going to be used to, you know, for this. And it made me think too, I guess you probably don't know exactly specifics of medical because she's probably not giving them, but do you have an idea of like how far along she has taken this now in terms of his kind of transition?
So she just filed a lawsuit to change his name. And under the Safe at Home Act in California, she filed to prevent me from even knowing his new name. So my guess is she has completely socially transitioned into a girl, and he's probably telling everybody he's a girl and believes he's a girl. I know he's been chemically castrated, which means more than likely by the time he's 18, he'll have a micro penis for the rest of his life. I don't know, which means he won't be married and he won't be able to have children. So I don't know if he's been physically castrated or not. I'm pretty sure that by closing these clinics in California, I've stopped that. At least I've impeded it.
That's good.
But I honestly don't know for sure. At this point, I'm basically preparing for my son's coming to me after 18, and then I'm going to deal with the fallout from all this.
That's where I was going to say next, because I won't, you know, I have a brother who is in a situation, and I was curious if that's been what you've been thinking about too, which is 10 years down the line, you know, 15 years down the line, when he is maybe not fully aware, but largely aware of what's happened to him, and dealing with what his outlook for like what can he make his life at that point? You know, like what can he do to gain some semblance of returning to normal? And I guess I know that's probably a really heavy topic because I'm sure it makes you emotional, but I'm curious if you have any kind of, you know, plan, I guess, you know, if you do enter in his life at 18, what you're going to try to do to peel things back, I guess, and, you know, help out there.
Look, I'm a Christian, so you know, if you've been sexually abused like this, you can still get into heaven. And the aim of this life is to get into heaven, right? And I think a lot of people forget this. It's weird. A lot of people who are Christians seem to forget this. The aim of this life is to get into heaven. The aim of a marriage is for two people who decide, come hell or high water, we're getting into heaven together. That's what marriage is. It's a form of asceticism, like monks getting together. We're going to go to heaven together. And having children is the same way. It's your job is to make wide the way to heaven and narrow the way to hell. That's your job.
Right.
Okay? So my son can absolutely get into heaven after he's been sexually abused like this. Will he be tempted to sins that other people have not been tempted to? 100%. And people who are not married or don't have sex, and those people live fulfilled lives as Christians, well, we know many saints who have done so.
Right.
We know all the bishops are doing that. Right. We know the monks are doing that. Yeah. So absolutely, you can do these things. There's absolutely a path forward for my son after he survives even the worst of the sexual abuse. So he needs someone, however, who's going to help him deal with that fact. But let's think about the other fact. There's going to come a day when James is going to look back and he's going to realize that from the time he was born, even before he was born, because now we know that she was planning this stuff even before my sons were born. It's still in the womb. She set out to betray him.
Right.
He set out to torture him. And she set out to do these things from him. And he's going to have to come to grips with this betrayal by his mother. The antidote to that is the entrance into masculine culture.
Yeah.
In which the actions of females are not morally significant on the lives of men. And it will be, it's an absolute clear lesson on first of all, the legal powers that women have. Women have the legal power in this country to take your children from you whenever they want,
Right.
castrate little boys, okay, and to never let them see their fathers. They have the legal ability to do that. So if that's the case, then we don't really have legally in the law, we don't have fathers in the law. Fathers are not represented in the law in any meaningful way.
Right.
So my son's going to have to come to grips with that. And so those are the paths forward for him. You know, one of the things he might be able to do is get back into boxing.
That would probably be very helpful to have a hobby to really kind of lean into and throw yourself at too. And and I'm glad that you said that too. And I hope my father's listening as well, because I'm sure that probably made him feel a bit better about, you know, with my brother. And just having to think about that psychological, I mean, it's going to be an avalanche, you know, to once you make that realization that, like, well, it wasn't even me who did this. It was my own mother who did this to me.
That's right.
And
That's right.
what is that going to do to him, you know, psychologically, right? Is that going to be something that you can, as a Christian, can you forgive your own mother for doing that to you? I mean, that for one is going to be a major hurdle, because, like, even for myself, I don't even know if I could do that, you know, like I don't. And so I, you know, all the support in the world, you know, to you, because I know that's going to be 10, 12 years down the line, right? It's going to be right on your plate. And I would imagine.
13, so I'm not that far out.
Yeah. Well, how old is he now? 10?
13.
13. Okay. So you're only 5 years away from this now.
5 years out. Yeah.
Interesting.
So he's probably completely in the delusional phase now. And when he starts getting near 18, it's probably when he's going to start waking up.
The love bombing from all the teachers and the students around him too.
That'll end.
Yep.
Yeah, that'll all end.
Yep. And he keeps in that, like, delusion.
Where he's going to be treated like a freak.
Yeah.
Yep.
And, you know, and I guess the other thing I would add to there too, because one of the big pushbacks that I saw on you had a big viral tweet that had went out, I think shortly after you had kind of known, like, okay, it's over and I got to wait till he's 18. You had made the announcement, I'm not going to pay for child support. But you got pushback a lot on that from people, even right wingers. And they were arguing, no, just go along with the system. So I'm curious, you know, what is your kind of, like, what's the robust argument against that, right? Why would you not give in to paying for the system and doing, quote unquote, the right thing to do?
So, you know, the way I've always looked at this is, I think these things are way overcomplicated by a lot of people.
Yeah.
If I'm not willing to pull out a razor and cut my son's balls off, why would I ever be morally willing to pay somebody else to do it?
Right.
Okay. You should never purchase something that you're morally unwilling to do yourself. Like, that's just a basic moral principle. That's a moral principle, honestly, that even the lowest of the low, people that we associate with the pagans,
right,
atheists, they even know this. Okay, they don't need an advanced morality like Christianity for this. So, you know, people that are telling me to go ahead and pay for this stuff, it's like, wait a minute, it's like I won't murder someone, but you're telling me to pay for a murder?
Right.
It doesn't make any sense, you know. So I'm not paying for anything that I wouldn't do myself.
Right. And
I won't purchase anything that I wouldn't build myself.
And even beyond,
if I would porn in my house, I ain't purchasing porn.
Right. No,
it's a simple moral principle. Yeah.
And I completely respect it too. And I think even an extension beyond that too was the visitation. That's the word I was looking for. The visitation as well, because you had basically said you're kind of like, by going along with it and doing the song and dance they're asking you to do, you basically by appearance and presence are confirming peripherally to your son that this is that the mother was right, and that, like, the judges are right, and that this is, like, the right course of action, which I thought was a pretty, 185 IQ kind of take. But people were bashing you for that. They're like, no, you need to go see your son. You need to go do this. But once you had said that, I was like, you got a point. That is a really good point.
Yeah, I don't think any father should do supervised visitations. Essentially what it means is, number one, you're teaching your sons that as the father, you have no patriarchal authority over them. That's number one. At some old woman with concern glasses can overrule your parental decisions when they're with you. So, number one, it does that. Number two, it confirms in the child's mind that you're dangerous.
Yeah.
And somebody has to be there to protect them from you. And number three, it shows that you're a pussy,
Yeah.
that you'll go along with it for reasons that involve emotions. So I'm just not willing to do that.
Yeah. No, and good on you too. I'm glad that you are a very staunch example of like what it's like to be right wing and actually, represent masculinity and what these things should do. Because a lot of what we end up getting is not that. It's men pretending to be men while telling you that they're all men. And it's just and so much of what we go through and what we see, especially recent events, as well as everything you've went through, is all indicative of like just this massive bloat, corruption, and also just like you can find like these even deeper rooted things. I think one thing that you'd pointed out that blew me away was in Texas, that for every assignment of child support, there's like some percentage kickback that gets paid into the treasury of the judges.
Yes, that's Title 4D. Title 4D was what created the family court system. And it gives reimbursements to the states for the collection of child support. In Texas, it's half a billion dollars. It's that much money.
That's insane.
And if you include all the states, it's as large as the largest defense programs. So these states are not going to lose this money. Okay, so they make more money when they issue more child support, and the law requires that it has to be child support issued in a divorce. Okay, it can't be child support that's like if you were a surrogate and you got issued child support, that doesn't count. It has to be child support from a divorce.
Interesting.
So the state in Texas has a $500 million monetary interest in maximizing divorce and maximizing the amount of child support that's paid.
So they're
Texas,
more
we actually have
incentivized to split marriages than they are just like random hookups.
Absolutely. That's right. Absolutely. 100%. In Texas, we actually have a law on the books which says that every court will act so as to maximize Title 4D funding. And the only way you maximize Title 4D funding is to make sure the father has less than 27% of the time with the child, because that maximizes child support under the Texas formula. So that's how it works. The courts are statutorily obligated to never give 50-50 custody. That's how it works.
That is insane. And I think this is another element of it too. You had been doing a lot of spaces, and maybe you still are. I haven't caught one recently, but there was one, and I was doing a lot of Uber back then before my YouTube channel was doing well, and I would listen into a lot of it. And one of the things was it was very hard to hear some of these fathers' stories when they would come in and they'd basically be like, "Oh yeah, I have a similar story to Jeff. This happened to me in 2008," and you hear it and you're like, how is that not like national news? Like they basically annihilated this guy's life. Like, and then you realize you're like, oh, this is status quo. This is normal.
That's right. And, it's one of these things where, we have this like industrial scale dispossession of fathers from their children. And it's the largest social problem in America. It is the cause of all social problems in America: welfare, education problems, jail, crime, everything is a result of this industrial scale dispossession of fathers of their children. And no one will touch it. The left won't touch it. The right won't touch it. The conservatives won't touch it. Elected officials won't touch it. The media won't touch it. It's a huge issue. I had so many people come up to me and say, well, you can't lie in court. So all these things these judges are doing to you, it must have been for a good reason. These are conservatives telling me this stuff. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And then all this stuff happened with the corruption with Trump in the courts happened. Yeah. And then I get calls from them saying, I apologize, I didn't know it was this bad. Well, how can this system be in place since the late 70s and you don't know it's this bad?
Right.
Like there's only one way, and that's because you actively don't want to know.
Right. No, exactly. And I want to read this, the super chat that just came in. This is from Donnie.
Sure.
I get it pulled back up on screen. He says, from Donnie Brooke, he says, I'm sorry, Jeff. When I first heard your story, I thought there was no way people would let it stand, and I'm super disappointed in the outcomes. I can't imagine how hard all this has been. And that is one element of this we had talked about, which was all of these people turning their back on you, in addition to there being, like what you had said, an embargo on the topic. So not only is digital media not talking about it at all, but when you had attempted locally to try to recruit people to help you out, they all basically told you, like, we can't help you either. Sorry, that's politically, unpalatable, but maybe not in those words.
Oh yeah, I mean, look, it went. I got thrown out of the Texas Capitol. I mean, I went down there to talk to, my representatives and my senator, and they thought I was just some wacko making shit up. Like, they just threw me out of their office, literally threw me out of the office. So finally, I had donated to some campaign, representatives' campaign, and I said, look, man, I'm going to call in a favor, man. I mean, I'm just asking, you're a lawyer. I'm just asking you to attend a hearing for 15 minutes. It's happening on Thursday. It's in downtown Dallas. I'm just asking you to come. So he came and he heard the testimony and could not believe it, fled, and then called all the legislators saying, this guy's not crazy. This is actually happening. Like, the first problem I had was nobody actually believed it was even happening. Okay. And I still encounter elected officials in Texas every once in a while saying that it's not happening and it never happened. Like, they never castrated kids in Texas. Well, yeah, they did, as a matter of fact. That's why we had to outlaw it. So that's the first thing.
Right.
Second thing was, there is a civil war in the Republican Party. And this issue steps right down in the middle of that civil war.
Yep.
So a lot of Republicans, it's hard for them to get their head around this, okay, what I'm about to say. But go check me out on it.
Yeah.
The transgender movement was started by Republicans. It was not started by Democrats. It was picked up by Democrats and pushed by Democrats, but it was founded and begun by Republicans. There's a guy named Paul Singer. He's the largest donor to the Republican Party. He's a hedge fund billionaire in New York. He's a New York leftist.
Yeah.
He founded the Human Rights Campaign, the yellow equal sign, the largest gay and transgender lobbying group in the world. That's the group that had the pride flag flying at every embassy in the world. That's the group that did that. That's the group that does the scorecard for gay and transgender issues that all the corporations follow. They do this. He's the largest donor to the Republican Party, and he started the child transgender movement. At that time, James Pritzker was also a Republican, and he was the third largest donor to the Republican Party at that time. And he also really enabled the child transgender movement. He now is a Democrat, and he's an ugly man in a dress. It was by Jennifer Pritzker.
It's funny.
So then you have, big donors like the Adelson family.
Yeah.
Who is the largest donor to the Republican National Committee. You ever wonder why, when you watch the Republican National Committee meetings on television, there's always a man in a dress, a cross-dresser they put on stage? It's the Adelson family. And they're the ones who paid for all the transgender story hours in the libraries across America. Everybody thought that was Democrats. Not. That was all paid for by Republicans. So what you have in the Republican Party is this. You have an extremely left-wing donor class.
Yeah.
And you have an extremely conservative voting class. And you have a tug of war between those two. And I'll tell you how it plays out. Texas is a great example. The bill that I passed is a great example. And the abortion bill we passed, those are two examples I'll show you that really illustrate this civil war. So it took me 6 years and, 3 sessions. Excuse me, I'm losing my voice. To get this passed. Now, why did it take 6 years for Republicans in Texas to outlaw castrating little boys?
Because they don't want to.
The answer is Paul Singer is the largest out-of-state donor.
And so are Paul Singer and Miriam Adelson also major fans of that one country over in the Middle East?
100% they are. Okay. And that's a pattern you see as well.
Right. It tracks.
100%. Yeah, absolutely. And so I go to pass this bill, and I wrote the bill. It went to the Texas Ledge. We call it the Texas Ledge Council. It's a group of lawyers that write bills, and it came out substantially similar to what I wrote. They took out 3 key sentences in the bill they actually passed. And those 3 sentences would have classified these procedures as felony child sexual abuse. And in the state of Texas, On a first offense of felony child sexual abuse, you can get life in prison. So that would have shut this down. It would have also made it criminal, which means you could not transport a child out of state with the intentions of doing these procedures. Just like you can't take your kid to Thailand and sexually abuse them and then come back.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
When you come back to Texas, we're going to throw you in the slammer for the rest of your life. It's that simple.
Right.
So they took those three things out. So what that allowed them to do the following thing. They went to the Texas electorate and said, do you see how conservative we are? We've outlawed these practices in Texas. And then they went to the donor class, the Paul Singers, the Adelsons, and the Pritzkers, and said, do you see how liberal we are? We left that loophole so parents can now go to California and Colorado and still get it done. See how liberal we are? You can still give us money. So these legislators split the difference. They fool the conservative base into thinking they've done conservative things. That's why you can have border bill after border bill after border bill passed in the federal legislature, and it never stops anything on the border because they put loopholes in it to please their donors.
That makes
Same
more
with
sense.
abortion in Texas. Everybody thinks Texas outlawed abortion. We haven't stopped a single abortion in this state. What they did is they waited until most abortions were chemical. So women nowadays take pills to have abortions.
You're right.
It kills their baby. They pass it. So Planned Parenthood makes more money on abortions now because they get the same amount of insurance money for after abortion care that they used to get, but now they don't have to have an emergency room hospital. They don't need to do it. So it's actually against the law for doctors to abort babies in Texas. So what they do is they give the pills and they put the woman in a room with a video camera and they videotape it and they pass the pills through kind of a tray like you'd see at a pharmacy. She takes the pills and they can prove that the pharmacist never gave her the pills.
She did it on her own.
So she aborted her own baby. And it turns out in all the 50 states, it's still legal for a mother to kill her child. It's only illegal for doctors to do it. So we haven't stopped any abortions, and they left these loopholes. And so this is how it works. This is why conservative politics has failed.
Yeah.
And I learned it the hard way, trying to get these bills passed.
Right.
They tell you one thing, leave loopholes, and so they can get the money from the liberal donors. That's how it works.
And so basically what you're saying is Paul Singer was basically instrumental in the loopholes that were placed in the legislation that led to your son being taken over to California.
Absolutely. I would be very surprised if the legislators didn't send my bill to Paul Singer lawyers to have them say what needs to be taken out. Like that level of involvement is present in all the state legislatures.
I mean, and this is why I think that you have some people who are resonating in politics who are on a lot of different runs now, which is the most important thing about politics isn't the why, the what, the how, it's who. It's who. It is who are the people who are in charge of these things.
That's right.
It was an instrumental kind of change for me to begin looking at things like that, because then I did start to kind of fall into a bit more of like ethos mattering more in terms of, how to trust somebody or where their credibility is. And I think maybe that's also, a proxy of just the information age we're in. A lot of people can make a lot of things make sense, but it might not actually be logical. People get lied to all the time with, emotional arguments. So that's kind of dying off. No one believes in like the sob story kind of stuff because it's kind of abused. And on those notes, though,
it is a massive step forward when you realize this, because we have been told this Enlightenment lie that you can construct government forms that will restrict government and protect your rights, right? There's no law that can ever protect your rights. And the way I get people to see is I've talked to a lot of Normie conservatives about this.
Yeah.
Because I think Hamilton was right. We should have had an elected monarch. We should have had an elected king.
Yeah.
The country would have been vastly better off. We would have never had a New Deal, probably never had a civil war if that happened.
Interesting.
So but the concept of this is very simple, right? Think about if you have a bad government and you have really good laws. That bad government's still going to figure out how to use those good laws against you. They'll find a way to get you with those good laws, okay? If you have a good government and terrible laws, they'll never use the bad laws against you.
Right.
So all that matters is the moral status of the authority. Nothing else matters. Laws don't matter.
Yeah.
Society doesn't matter. It's the moral status of the authority is the only thing that makes for a good society.
Exactly. And on these notes, and I'll get to the super chat here in a second, whoever said I didn't thank you.
Yeah.
This is why I've moved to a lot more of where Joel Ebben is at and a lot more of the Christian nationalists, which is, how about if anyone is in any position of power, they're Christian and we don't accept anyone else? Because again, all that matters is not the hammer that's being used. It doesn't matter the courtroom you're sitting in. What matters is who is the person who's holding it, wielding it, getting ready to make that choice. But the super chat came in. Let me grab this here from Madden Williams. Says, Jeff, I'm sorry to hear that you and your son are going through this. As someone who has gone through sexual abuse and the torment it puts you through, it's insane that this is protected by law. And so thank you for that, Madam Williams. Appreciate that.
God bless you. God bless you.
Well, let's get into another one too, because I don't want to move past it. We'll go back a little bit. Why, in your opinion, because I already have some ideas, and I'm sure the chat already knows too, why is the conservative Inc. or Con Inc. unwilling to move to a position or even be vocal about family court, especially when you have individuals like Charlie Kirk, Matt Walsh, I could probably go down the list, of just get married, right? Which is just, to me, the most retarded advice, quite frankly, I think anyone could ever give. And so you're somewhere in between them and Andrew Tate, who says, don't get married, just, have as much, be polygamous or whatever. So what is yours answer to both of those ends? What would you say to that?
Well, so you have two questions in there. One is, why is Con Inc. Not address these issues? And the answer is Con Inc. will always take the position that women take. Conservatism in any society that has any element of democracy, a democratic republic like ours or a parliamentary republic, whatever, it's always effeminate, always effeminate. And the reason is just utterly simple and obvious once you see it. Women outnumber men in all democracies. There's more women than men.
Yeah.
And so in democratic systems, they choose who rules. And what time and time again, what women choose is they choose cucked men who will enact policies for them. We'll see them as victims and see them having no moral agency, and will take responsibility for them. That's what women want. So they want that in a husband, they want that in a boyfriend, and they want that in a government. And that's the government that they elect. So the people that you see that are big in conservative politics, either in the elected side, in the media, in activism, they're all selected by women. And so that's the first thing. Conservatism is inherently effeminate. And once you understand that, a lot of conservatism makes sense. The second question you asked was about marriage.
Right.
Well, my view is that, like, for example, with Christianity, a lot of people say, well, Christianity is first and foremost based on faith and this sort of thing. And in a certain sense, I agree with that.
Yeah.
But to me, Christianity is first and foremost a search for the truth.
Amen.
Right. And so I'm the same way with politics. I'm the same way with everything. Fundamentally, I'm looking to see what the truth is. That's why I call myself a realist. Right. I try to look at the world as without the blinders of ideology. Nobody can do that. I have my own problem. Just like anybody else.
Right.
But a realist tries to face the facts as they lay.
Right.
And the trad explanation is that we just get married and forget the risks. Yeah, okay, maybe that's one thing, to forget the risks to you as a grown man who's capable of accepting some risk. But it's not okay to accept those risks for your children. And this system destroys children at an industrial scale. We've got almost half of children in America now being raised in single mother homes, okay, without fathers.
Yeah.
So it's not just you that's taking the risk, it's your children. Let me just break this down, because I like to break it down to what actually happens to people. Like, I have friends in Houston this has happened to.
Yeah.
They could take your kids, she can remarry and have another man raise your kids. And she can do that in your house because she took the house. She'll sleep in your bed with another man who's raising your kids. And she can make you pay for it in child support. And she can even change your child's religion into something. You know, I have a friend of mine whose the mother converted the child to Islam. There's nothing you can do about it. Okay. This is the risk we're talking about. This is not a small risk. Okay.
Right.
This isn't, you know, just paying some money. This is a giant risk to your children. So I don't think you can take risks like that for your kids lightly.
Right.
So my view on marriage is this. First of all, the way people think about the risk is wrong. You know, insurable risks, the stuff that we normally talk about in risk management, I've done a lot of that in my work career. That implies that you don't have control over the risks.
Right.
So you have to have a risk that you don't have control over, that happens in a statistically predictable way,
Right.
and that has statistically predictable costs.
Yeah.
None of
large
those apply to marriage risk. Okay. It's all within control of the wife. So there's no way to mitigate such a risk. You can't prevent or mitigate such a risk because it's just completely in her control. She can just decide to do it and do it. Okay. So there's no risk management that you can do that would lower your risk in some statistical sense. There's no way to do statistical analysis on things that are subject to human volition like this. So that's first of all. You can't think of it that way. So another way to approach it is like this. Suppose you want to change the laws, but you know that women are the stronger sex in democratic societies. So how are you going to get the marriage laws changed so they don't favor women the way they do now? My view is that you abstain from marriage and you make this a problem for women. And then women, you perhaps can get women to change the laws. But I definitely think that on any rational assessment of what could happen to your children, a rational man would not marry in these conditions.
Right. And I completely agree. I think you look at, you have obviously with the children, you have alimony, you have, and there's the aspect too of the aftermath as well, which is, for one, you have the kids removed out of the home, right? You have to pay child support for it. And people don't realize like all the added costs that go in with that now, because now, you know, since it's not in the home, all of these things were like, you know, the electric bill that he's paying, it doesn't mean anything anymore. So now everything becomes completely out of pocket, out of home, and it's all additional. And a lot of guys get crushed on some of those amounts. And I agree, because this is like a, you know, the state should not be the one who determines marriage, right? This is a thing that, you know, ultimately needs to go back to the church, as well as things like no fault divorce, which you would think with the Republican kind of super majority that we have like right now, you would think that'd be a very easy thing to go and get away from. But you are right in the aspect that the majority of Con Inc. can only go as far as their wife lets them. And that's something I've picked up on quite a bit, which is, you can see it from Charlie Kirk, Matt Walsh, like, and I hate to bring him up, but if he's in here, Zeb, you know, he even says like, I can't do the woman thing. And that is because the moment you start talking about it, you can expect when you leave that door and you go back to your wife, you're going to go foot tapping on the ground. Like, oh, is that what you think about women? And they can't escape it, because then that threatens, for one, just the emotional turmoil of the home. And like, you don't want her mad raising the kids, because then you have to have extra responsibilities. There's so much that goes there. And it's sad to me.
Yeah, I mean, think about the life of a man in this situation. People talk about men need to lead in their families and things. Yeah, okay. What you're leading is not just the woman. You're fighting the laws, the feminist society, in many cases the churches themselves. You're fighting everything. It's not just your wife, you know. That's what you're taking on here. But like, imagine like you've got 2 kids, right? Imagine someone with 2 kids. And this person has a wife that wants to do certain things. And maybe they're not good things. What if he says no? Well, okay. So in Texas, with 2 kids, he's going to lose 30% of his gross pre-tax income in divorce right off the bat. That's just a flat formula. The court has no discretion over that. He'll lose 30% of his gross pre-tax income. She'll be able to deduct that that is child expenses on her taxes, and he won't. Okay. Yeah, you didn't know that?
No, I didn't. That's aggressive.
It's the only case in the tax code in which the person who pays the money doesn't get to deduct it.
That's
the receiver of the money gets to deduct it. So if you look at most business, like if you took 30% of the gross pre-tax income of Google or Apple, they would go bankrupt.
Right.
Businesses don't have margins like this. So that means that you're done. Like you're not going to be able to start a business. You're not going to be able to save money. You're done. If you're below a certain income level, and I've done it in the Dallas County because I know the cost of things in Dallas County. When you hit below about 40,000 in income, you can't have a car or a home anymore. You're homeless. And if you go down to the Title IV D courts in Dallas County, that's exactly what you see. Guys that make less than $40,000 a year, and they just put 1,500 of them a week into the jail just every week because they can't pay.
And
they chose to pay for their rent for an apartment and their car payment instead of paying the child support, and they go to jail. That's how it works. So, this is what you're looking at. Now, this woman can then, do this to you and take everything from you. Like people say it's 50-50. It's really 50-50. Women usually get most everything.
Right.
And oftentimes they get all the assets and the men get all the debt. Okay. So she can do this to you. What are you going to do now when she says, she wants to do something and you think it's the wrong thing to do? Right. She has power over the husband.
Right.
The laws empower her over the husband in tremendously oppressive ways. And believe me, these men know this.
Right.
Men who've been married a while totally understand this, which is why you look at a lot of men who've been married for 10 years or whatever, and you go, this guy is so passive and so cucked. Oh, no. He's being very wise. He's letting his children grow up to be 18, and he's not jeopardizing his kid's life, and he's not jeopardizing his own life.
Right.
That's just the reality. You have to become an effeminate cuck in order to save yourself.
Yeah. So
my claim is that that's a fate worse than death for your children and for you, and you probably shouldn't get married.
No, I'm 100% with you on that. And it's a negative feedback loop, because if you have sons and you're as a father in this cucked, like effeminate role, your son's going to emulate you, and you basically just repeat the cycle.
Right.
And
that is correct.
And that's why, I have this hard time, because I would like to be able to give guys advice about what to do, right? Because, I'm married, but I'm also the same way, right? How you would apply it. Like, there's no kind of general advice. It's basically like at every individual, like you just have to make the best guess. And
that's right.
And, well, more than a guess, obviously have a bit more vetting process there. But if I struggled with it, right? Like if I had a hard time with it, how am I to expect any man, anything, less than me, and I hate to say it that way, have any success at all? I mean, it's just impossible. And then you look at these situations at large, and I see it all the time. You go to Walmart, you can see it. It's just like, it's hard for me to not see it anymore. And
everywhere.
It's passive men. Yeah. Loud women, passive men. And it's like the roles are flipped. This is exactly what it says in the Bible by inverting the order. Right. And that's the good versus evil here.
Yeah.
And I guess when you say those things, obviously any woman listening immediately is getting offended. And that seems to be the trigger, which is, how much can you handle your woman being offended, or how much can you handle an offended woman, coming at you? And I think that's the mark of the man anymore, which is some guys will just say whatever they want, and they're like, I don't care. Like, that's the most masculine thing you can do anymore, is not care what women have to say.
Yeah. I mean, look, I've had white knight guys. I've been punched over saying this stuff. Like, white knight guys get really offended about it too. Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. I've got stories you wouldn't believe. Oh yeah. You wouldn't believe.
Was it about like an activist?
He busted my lip, but he hit me like 3 times and I didn't go down. I mean, he hits like a girl, and if he hit me 3 times, you should have knocked me out.
That's funny. You should have said that to him too in the moment. What's going on?
The cop said, you want to press charges? I said, hell, everybody just saw him hit me 3 times. He punches like a girl. That's probably punishment enough.
Right. That's got to be a bit humiliating there.
Yeah. I mean, like the thing is, we can all plainly observe this. This is what I mean about being a realist, right? It's a lot of people are making these decisions based on what they think ought to be the case. But you're right. You can walk into Walmart. You can go to any restaurant. You can actually observe it in your church.
Yeah.
And you'll see exactly the same behaviors, right? This is something that you can observe and verify yourself, and you know it's the case. Now, women get upset, but I don't see men getting upset, for example, when we say, hey, most violent criminals are men.
Right.
We don't get upset by that. We know that. I mean, that's why do we train in boxing? Why are we training in wrestling? Like, I train with weapons, blades and guns. Like, why do I do that? Because most violent criminals are men, and my role in society is to protect society from violent men.
Right.
I mean, the whole history of the world is good men protecting women from bad men. That's the entire, that's, if you had to summarize human history, that's it, right?
Right.
So, but men don't get upset by that. Men don't, it's no big deal. But you say, hey, women are responsible for most divorces. Women commit most child abuse. A lot of people don't know that. Even women commit even most sexual abuse of children.
Yeah.
People don't know that. Women get very offended by this. And it has to do with just the nature of the female self-image.
Well, I think that Myron has a great take on this, which is he says all the time, like, men have to live in reality. Like, men are the ones that have to live in reality. Like, they're forced to. There's no other reality you get to live in. Where women get to live in the reality that social media, the institutions, and their friends allow them to live in, and no one's willing to pull them out, not even other men. And then you get combated with exactly what you said, the white knighting. Because any man who's attempting to push back against this has to then, go up against the white knight whose only play in the sexual marketplace is to buddy themselves up in the beta role with the female. Sure. And so there's like all these kind of mechanics at play. And I think anyone on the service, they look in and then they see, they see Myron or they see me or they see you and they're like, this guy must hate women. But more often than not, it's just because they have not been presented with the actual reality they live in, because everyone else is doing their part and making sure their delusion stays up so they don't, start crashing out.
That's right. It's like, it's weird, that it gets described as, I've had many people, Republican women, say that I hate women. And I'm like, well, look, I'm just looking at the world as it really is. I don't know that's it. I don't think it reflects badly on women. Look, if you gave men the same incentives in the law that women have, men would probably divorce at the rates women do.
Right.
If men could take the children, all the money, force the woman to pay him, a third of her pre-tax income, gross pre-tax income for 20 years. And make her pay all the extra expenses and do all the traveling for vacations and stuff that has to happen. I'm pretty sure lots of men would do the same damn thing.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's an incentive system here. But women have come to believe they're entitled to these incentives.
Right.
And that comes down to really the trad view of the world, which I think is just completely cracked. Right.
Yeah.
This idea that basically the early 1950s is what we should use as the example of the natural human way, the natural social way. And that's totally false. I mean,
right.
I've had people say, well, I don't want my woman working. Well, I do. Because when I read the Bible, all the women work. All the women in the Bible work. All of them.
Right.
The Psalms and the Proverbs talk about women working in the market to make money for the family while the man is out practicing for war at the city gate.
Right.
Right? Women have always worked in cottage industries. We used to call them cottage industries because women could do them in the home.
Yeah.
That's what
at home or close to home. Right.
That's what it was about. Yeah. And women raised young children and girls. And between the ages of 9 and 12, depending on what society you were in, boys went with the fathers between 9 and 12, and men raised boys. So men have also always equally participated in child rearing. The reason that Jews and Italians had this reputation for being a mama's boys is because they didn't go with their father till they were 12. In most societies, it was 9. So you had some German boy back in the medieval period who at 9 years old is doing man's work, and he's laughing at his Italian Tyrolean friend who's Italian, staying with his mama till he's 12, and he got 3 full years of making fun of his friends, while they were still doing women's work in the house.
That's funny. I didn't know that.
That's where that reputation for mama's boy came from. Men have always raised children equally to women, and women have always worked. This trad view of the world is false.
Yeah.
And it's not what we observe, and it's not what's good for families. Women should have an obligation to be productive for the family, and men should have an obligation to raise children.
Yeah. And it's, it's again, a lot of these like assumptions, and these assumptions become, very, very dangerous, like with the entitlement aspect. And the same thing for men as well, right? Like you're telling me I have a 92% chance I can get paid for the next 18 years of my life just if I walk away from this marriage. Oh yeah, done deal. I'll go do it. I'll take my chances.
Lots of men would do this if they had that incentive.
Right.
This is why it's not anti-woman to talk about reforming the laws. And I'm making a logical argument. This is not an argument that would prevail with women, right? Because they're not
not enough emotion.
But the logic tells us the reality of something, right? And so we should reason from the reality of it. Figure out how to be persuasive of the reality. The reality is, if men had the same incentives, men would probably do the same thing. Probably not in as large numbers as women, because men do have a concept of honor among themselves.
Right.
They would be embarrassed. I'll give you an example. If I was married to a woman who was taking child support, I would tell the man to keep the child support.
Right.
Nobody needs to pay my household, period.
Right.
I would never accept it.
Yeah.
And I would demand that if she had children, if I was I would never marry a woman like that. But if I did, I would not marry her unless she said, anytime he asks to have his kids, you have to say yes.
Word. Yeah.
If he says, I want him for a year, you have to say yes. If he says, I want to have him next weekend and it's your time, you say yes. There's never a time you say no.
Yeah.
That's what I would do, because I have a sense of honor. Men have a sense of honor. So probably not in as great numbers, but in large numbers, men would do it.
Yeah. And I think that has to go with, again, this is more, the biggest issue here is the fact that there's a clear and easy attack path towards the system that's upholding it through incentive structure that doesn't even have to go into the male and female.
That's right.
I hate this. I hate all men. I hate all women. Yeah. If we could just.
If you look at what I talk about, Atlas, I only talk about changing the laws to change the incentive structures.
Yeah.
And I'll get 10,000 comments saying that I hate women. I'm just talking about changing the incentives.
Right.
It's so fun.
And I think there is this kind of base level belief, though, for a lot of women that they think life is harder for them. And that's why there is this push for single mothers need to have all of the resources in the world thrown at them because they have it harder. But one thing that you highlighted to me that I would definitely want to talk about, to highlight to people as well, the almost non-existent difference between single father statistic homes versus married parent homes.
Yeah, that's right.
That blew me away. But I guess I also kind of thought about it too, which is like, maybe that's a proxy then of the fact of like the 8% of men that win had to have been so above and beyond like good representatives with such, awful counterparts that maybe there's a bit of bias in that to that degree. But I'm curious, if you could go into detail of like how similar those are and then how bad single mother statistics are.
Yeah. So let's first talk about the nature of the numbers. So
yeah.
Believe it or not, statisticians and researchers have asked the question you asked. Well, is this just not because, you had really bad moms that lost custody? Because you got to be a really bad mom to lose custody.
Right.
So then they look, okay, well, let's just look at cases where the mother was lost to accidents.
Okay.
Or illness.
Okay.
And they see the exact same numbers. The numbers are exactly the same. If you're a single mother because the father died by accident or illness, the single mother stats are just as bad as women who get the children in divorce.
It's wild.
So we know that it is the father. And I'll tell you another one, like the Greek Orthodox Church has done a longitudinal study, I think almost a 30-year-long study on this, where they looked at what causes children who go to college to maintain church attendance all the way through college. They can't really go beyond college because you can't keep in touch with these people.
Right.
But in college, you can do this, okay? Because you can find the Orthodox churches around and you can find out and you can follow. So they followed children who grew up and multiple generations, 2 generations of children who grew up and tracked who went to. And the only thing that correlates with church attendance once they leave the home and go to college is whether the father took the family to church. If the mother took the family to church, it had no effect whatsoever.
That's wild. So this is indicative, like moral compass is much more inheritable from the father than it is from the mother.
Only determined by the father. It is literally only determined by the father.
So
Which is
almost
why
absolutely. Okay.
But once you get your head around that your moral habits and your dispositions come only from the father. Now you look at single mother homes and you say, well, what happens when children don't get these habits and dispositions? And what you see is exactly what you would expect. 20% higher failure rates in education, 30%, a little bit less, but 30% higher incarceration rates, much higher rates of victimization by crime. They become more crime victims, believe it or not, by like 50%.
It's wild.
It's wild. So the social outcomes in single mother homes are absolutely terrible. This is why I say the stripping of fathers, the industrial scale stripping of fathers out of their children's lives would solve almost all social problems in this country. Almost all of it would go away. You would drop, imagine a 1/5 drop in criminality. Just think about that.
Yeah, that's
Just think about
hard to
a
imagine.
30% increase in graduation rates from high school and college. Like this would change the entire country, would change everything in this country. Okay. It's the number one social problem, and nobody will talk about it. And it only comes from fathers. And this is well known because liberals hate this result.
Yeah.
So they've tested it over and over again. They've subjected it to the most, strenuous statistical analysis, but it's highly replicated. So we know it's probably true.
And you also see a lot of these men who are raised in these single mother homes also typically are the ones who are effeminate. I don't know if you saw the skirts among black men, young black men, is now another trending thing. And who's most likely to have a single mother home? Well, in the black community. And you kind of answered a question that has been floating around the last couple of interviews as well as in our spaces, which is if you had to pick, right? So there's like three kind of like big societal issues. You have the women problem, you have the black, non-white problem, you have the JQ. And so of these three, what would be the most rational and meaningful to pursue first? And it sounds like you're saying the women question by far, because it would lend itself to a lot of other elements too, which would probably ultimately help with crime, lend it to the black issue, and then ultimately the JQ, I would imagine.
Yeah. So if you're looking for peaceful solutions, and I don't like to use the word solution, so I like to say, peaceful ways of dealing with it, because there's no perennial human problems. They're never going to be solved. Right. It's a question of just how you deal with them in a society.
Yeah.
If you're looking for peaceful ways, the only way forward on the JQ, on the non-white crime problem and non-white society problem, multiculturalism, let's call it, and on the women problem, is you must harden the youth against propaganda. You must harden the youth against the miseducation that's given to them by the social milieu that they're in.
Word.
Now, let me just suggest something that may offend some people.
Yeah.
What of the three groups we talked about here, what group has most successfully resisted outside propaganda and raised their children in their own culture? I submit it's the Jews.
Yeah, by a good margin, I would say.
A good margin. Their people are not easily propagandized.
Right.
And the main reason for that is they have intact families. They do not allow divorce. It's very low. So, so one of the things that we could do by solving this problem in the family courts and families is we would grow propaganda-resistant sons and daughters.
So this seems...
they would leave with the attitudes and dispositions that would lead them to be skeptical of anything but Christian morality.
It's okay. So this seems to be in line with what the Groypers are then. The Groypers seem to be this kind of fitting that definition. That's awesome.
People hate me for that. I love the Groypers.
Same.
Because what the Groypers are trying to do is to prevent young men from being propagandized by liberals. And by liberals, I mean more than just the left.
Right.
Conservatives are what we used to call classical liberals or libertarians, right?
Right.
So it's all forms of liberals. They want to make young men resistant to propaganda from liberals. And that is a good goal. And look, do they go too far sometimes? Yeah. But you know what? Excess zeal in the pursuit of the destruction of the left is no vice.
Oh, I'm 100% with you on that. When, especially like, and we'll use a Walmart example, you know, when I step outside of, you know, my home, I don't sit there and go, man, like, look at all these like jacked white guys over here. Like, there's so much like toxic masculinity. They're like throwing that car around. Like, no, it's the complete opposite. It's like, there's all of these like, again, like cucked and effeminate and like feminism's everywhere. So I'm right there with you. It's like when this one group is starting to go harsh, it's like there may be like the one of two testosterone filled groups in the whole world. It's like, I'm not going to smack them when you know the balance is all completely against them. But it's also indicative of just being emotional too. People can't stand seeing bad words.
Oh yeah, you're right. But this is one of the reasons why I really, I'm not against this framing of the problem as one of masculinity, recovering masculinity. I'm not against that framing.
Yeah.
I'm not against the framing of recovering marriage. I'm not against the framing of recovering traditional Christian society. All that's good. You know, I'm 100% for it. I work for it in my own local community every single day.
Yeah.
But I think the best framing, or a peaceful way forward, is counter propaganda and propaganda resistance.
Yeah.
Our people are too vulnerable to propaganda from elites, foreign elites mainly.
Yeah.
And you look at how many people have been fooled by the Russia hoax, even on the Republican side.
Right.
It shows you that the propaganda regime that Americans have been subjected to was carefully tailored to appeal to conservative dispositions.
Right.
And so really the first step to being propaganda resistance is to give up liberal conservatism and step to the right. You know, you need to take 2 side steps to the right.
Yes.
And so like I once had a counselor who, you know, the court sent me to these counselors to try to get dirt on you, you know. And I always tell the courts, I'm never going to lie to you. You can just ask me directly. I'll never lie to you.
Yeah.
You know? And counselor asked me, he said, well, Mr. Younger, you know, sounds like from like my internet searches about you that, you know, you seem to like be in favor of authoritarianism. I said, yeah, I'm an authoritarian. I think we should have an authoritarian government.
She's like whispering it to you.
Yeah, because it's only the moral status of the authority that matters.
Right.
Nothing else matters. The laws don't matter. The rules don't matter. It's just the moral status of the authority. That makes me inherently an authoritarian. And so then they start probing my boys. Well, is he a strict parent? Is he, you know, is he authoritarian? Because that's one of the things they stick men with. So, but see, I was raised, my mother abandoned me when I was very young.
Oh, I had no idea.
And
I'm sorry
my
about
uncle
that.
raised me up. My uncle raised me on a farm.
Okay.
A big farm, 2,500 acre farm and ranch, with an aircraft service that did crop spraying. So I learned how to work on aircraft. It was a good experience for me.
So now you make a lot more sense just hearing that part.
Yeah. So my uncle raised me exactly the way Rousseau recommended in Emile, in the book Emile. I don't think my uncle had ever read Emile.
Yeah.
To him, it was just common sense. He's like, I don't ever need to punish you because natural consequences are just going to punish you. So I'll give you an example. I was 9 years old.
Yeah.
And we only could get one station out in the country. We only had one television station. We could only get it at night because when the air cooled, the radio waves that would bounce and we could get it.
That's funny.
So, and that was on NBC, you know, and I watched the show called Kung Fu with David Carradine. I love that show. So my uncle would let me watch 30 minutes and then he'd switch it over to the news. So I could see the first half of every episode.
Yeah.
So I watched some stuff and I went into my bedroom, and in the night, because, you know, it's in the country, there's no lights outside.
Right.
Your window is like a mirror because it's so bright inside. So I started doing some chopsocky moves, you know, and I kicked my window out.
Oh.
So my uncle walks in there and he says, hey, you better push all that glass outside and throw all that glass outside that's on the floor. So it took me an hour to do this. I broke the window off and pushed everything outside.
Yeah.
And then he looked at me and he goes, wow, 2 feet of snow out there. What are you going to do now that you don't have a window in your bedroom? Be sure and close the door and put a towel down there because I don't want to get cold. And I slept without a window until I could get enough money to put one in.
That's a way to teach somebody.
He's like, I don't have to punish you. If you do that, that's fine. It's my window. You broke it. You just got to replace it. I don't care. It's your business.
Yeah.
One time I was driving a truck out into a pasture because I put salt licks down for the cattle, 25-pound blocks.
Yeah.
And I fueled the truck up and I left the gas cap sitting up on the truck. And so when I drove out into the field, it got lost somewhere. And he just looked at me and he said, Jeff, how are you going to get those salt licks out there now that we know you're not responsible enough to drive a pickup truck? So I had to fashion a sled and I used my motorcycle and I had to pull it out, and so I could buy my own truck, And so he just taught me that way. I grew up like that with just natural consequences.
That's awesome.
Masculine men this is how boys used to be raised when they went with their father at 12 years old.
Yeah. Right.
You live, it's like Myron talks about, you just live in the real world, and the real world will just teach you, everything you need to know. You don't really need much teaching.
Right. Yeah. You either put up or you give up.
Yeah. So I did the same thing with my boys. I said, look, all you have to do is be reasonable. Your room doesn't have to be perfectly clean. It should basically just never rise to anybody's attention. You don't have to be perfect. Nobody's perfect.
Right.
And I said, the no mistakes principle. I said, take any risk you want. If you break something or crush something and you can fix it, it's not a mistake. Don't worry about it. So like you break a glass, if you clean up all the glass and nobody gets cut, not a mistake. Go do it again. Try it again.
Right.
Be risky. So all these counselors would ask my sons, is he an authoritarian parent, and my sons would say, well, my dad doesn't really have any rules. And they would go, what? Because they think of me as an authoritarian.
Right.
And my dad just says, be reasonable with people. And as long as we think about other people and how they feel, then, we don't really have to have any rules.
And they're like, this is the opposite of what we need.
Yeah. He said, do you have any rules? And they would say, yeah, my dad had to make one rule one time. What was that? Well, we kept stepping on our iPads on the floor and breaking them. So now we have to have our iPads on tables. We can't ever have them on the floor.
Something completely reasonable.
Yeah. So like they just could never pin this authoritarian parent on me. But if you think about it, it is authoritarian because I'm saying that it's the moral character that you present to other people that matters. It's not the rules you follow. So I tell my boys not to follow rules. Do what's prudent, what generally produces good outcomes. Learn some wisdom so you can figure out what produces good outcomes. Learn that good outcomes are different for different people.
Yeah.
Learn that and figure it out on your own in a safe way where you can make mistakes. That's what I did for them,
Yeah.
So they never could pin that on me. A lot of men have not been taught that because they've been in female households. Okay.
Yeah.
They weren't with their father at the mechanic shop. They weren't with their father, building things where they could just make mistakes and just rebuild it. So what? You learn something, right?
Yeah.
They were with mothers who make rules. So what's your mentality now? Your mentality is you express your moral character in how well you know the rules and how well you follow them.
Obedience.
And if you think about it, that's a very Talmudic understanding of what morality is.
Right. Legalistic laws.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's why in other cultures, we often encounter this as a kind of femininity. Because rule following is not what masculinity is in our culture. It's your moral character and your ability to produce good outcomes, no matter what the rules are.
Yeah.
That is what makes you a man.
And this is kind of in line with Christianity in general too, right? Which is the belief in trust and faith in something much greater than anything that's here on earth, right? Which is why, Christianity stands against tyrants. And we're obviously losing that. We're obviously losing a lot of that. It might all be gone. I do have some faith when I see people like the Groypers and some other smaller pockets of young men. But it does feel like exactly what you had said earlier. The plane is going to crash no matter what. Like it's almost, it's way too far gone now. And now it's a matter of picking up as many.
What kind of crash are we going to have?
Yeah, exactly. Like, and how can you best prepare yourself for what's on the other side of that and kind of gauge, am I even going to be alive to see it? Is it happening now? Like what time frame?
Right.
And I'm curious, what timeline would you kind of give this whole kind of current American experiment before we see either a complete change?
We got one or two more generations, I think. Yeah. Okay. So generation's about 20 years.
Yeah.
And I think the most likely scenario is a slow burn out. I don't think it's going to be some catastrophe.
Yeah.
I think it'll be a slow burn out. If you're talking in terms of preparation, I think the lives of the saints are very instructive here. You know, one of my favorite saints, I have his icon here in my house is Moses the Black. And
Okay.
he was a pirate in the Mediterranean. And he killed many people. And he raped many men and many women. He had no qualms about it. I'm pretty sure he probably raped animals. He was a terrible, despicable man. He even engaged in cannibalism when he was a pirate. He got into a terrible storm. The ship sank. Everybody died. He wound up washed up on the shore of Egypt in the Mediterranean. And some Christian monks took care of him, and it took him almost a year to get him back into health. And he converted to Christianity, and he eventually became the abbot of the monastery there, and became one of the greatest Christian saints. There's a famous story where robbers came, and remember, this is a fierce man who could kill just about anybody he met.
Right.
Okay? Robbers came in and were stealing the golden chalice and the cross and stealing all the stuff that had been donated for the poor. And they left, and he just let them do it. And the monks were beside themselves. They're like, you could have stopped them. You could have killed all of them. You didn't stop them. And he goes, I know. But you know what? They left that silver bowl. And he picked up the silver bowl, and they ran after the robbers and gave them the silver bowl and said, you forgot this. Take the silver bowl too. Because if you're willing to kill people in this, you must be desperate for yourselves, and I don't want you to be without it. And all of those people brought the stuff back and converted to Christianity. So there were many things like this that this man did. He's a very powerful man. And there's another, well, we can't call him a saint because it was canonized, but
Okay.
it's a story told by a saint at a Russian monastery where there was a monk who would get drunk every night, and all the other monks hated him and treated him like shit and called him names and did all kinds of things. And he finally died. And none of the monks wanted to go to the funeral. And the abbot of the monastery excommunicated all of them for 10 years immediately, right on the spot. You cannot take communion for 10 years. And you have to live a life of repentance for what you have just done. And then he explained the truth of the matter, that this man had actually been captured by Arab slavers, and had, as a boy, when he was like 5 years old, and spent 10 years of his life being daily raped by homosexual men. They would get him drunk and rape him all day, every day. He had all kinds of health problems you can imagine from this, right? Incontinence, all kinds of problems.
Right.
But he survived it and was able to escape. Okay. And he came to the monastery, converted to Christianity. And he said, I had worked with him for 20 years, and I finally got him down to only taking one drink a day. And you won't go to his funeral because you're judging your brother like this?
Yeah. That's powerful.
So,
and you said his name was who? Who was that?
This is at a Russian monastery. We don't know the name. It was a story told by a Russian saint, so we don't know. But what it tells you is, when you want to prepare for these things, is it shows you how you really have to prepare for these things, right? Yeah. The preparation is, certainly it's got some material aspects to it. It has political aspects to it. But you need to focus on creating the means of your sanctification in the midst of tremendous hardship. And to a large degree, that means abandoning your attachment to material things.
Yeah.
And it means abandoning your attachment to outcomes in the world.
Yeah.
And when you do that, you will find that your will begins to conform to God's will. And then everything that happens, it seems like you willed it because you just want what God wants.
Yeah.
Right? That's what miracles are. It seems like the person's doing the miracle, like the saint's doing the miracle, or, you know, Paul's doing the miracle or whatever.
Right.
What's actually happening is Paul just wants what God wants, and it happens.
Yeah.
Because he's so in line with what God's will is. So this is the kind of preparation that we never talk about, right? Everybody talks about, you know, political systems, you know, should we have a monarchy?
Yeah.
How do we have enough money in the bank? You know, the most important preparation is to have no preferences for these outcomes, so that you can do what's right rather than what's expedient.
Yeah.
And I think young men have not been told this, that men do what's right. They don't do what's expedient.
Yeah.
A lot of times that means taking some serious pain.
That's actually a, for one, a beautiful segue, but two, you're exactly right. A lot of this is, if we're looking at it in the way of, in terms of what you can do physically, there are some like considerations to make in terms of, preventing against it and for sanctification and salvation, obviously protecting Christianity, but absolutely spot on the viewpoint that the major goal we should have should never be usurped by anything of this earth, which is again, salvation, sanctification, and also like learning and understanding what it actually means to be a Christian. A lot of Christians, even some of the ones that I really enjoy, are still largely biblically illiterate, and I'm not, biblically literate at all. It's a very, big book, and you could read the same chapter four different times and come away with different things. And that is a major aspect, and a great segue too, because you, as well as many people in this chat can probably say the same, have been a major kind of influence towards Orthodoxy and away from Protestantism. And there was a few arguments that you had made, but ultimately, as I began to look at it, and a bit more kind of a comprehensive view, you judge a person by their fruits. That's kind of like the way that you judge somebody. So I was like, well, if I judge Protestantism by its fruits is the current state of what America is.
That's correct.
And that was a hard thing for me to reconcile, because I think on its surface, you'd have to say, well, then there must be something flawed with whether it's Protestantism or the current iteration of it. And that made me just want to drop it immediately. And I was like, okay, hold on. Maybe there is an answer somewhere else, and I've been looking in the wrong spot this whole time. So I'm curious if you have like an elevator pitch, if you will, of Orthodoxy and what you saw wrong with Protestantism and what your journey was with that. Because I don't know if you started Orthodox, if you started Protestant, and how that went about.
No, I was an atheist most of my life. Yeah. One of the things that I have to account for is I know for a fact I used my persuasive skills to turn people away from Christianity, and I'll have to account for that in the afterlife. But look, for me, it was this one fact. Let me try to relate it to another domain.
Okay.
That I practice, and you can, because this is a dicey issue, especially with Protestants, and actually somewhat with Catholics, Roman Catholics as well.
Yeah.
Because the Orthodox view is kind of the problem with Protestantism is that it kept too much of Roman Catholicism, actually. Interesting.
Okay.
Yeah. I trained with blades. When I was in the Marine Corps, I was in the Philippines, and I learned to fight with blades there. When the Spaniards conquered the Philippines and Negros Occidental, they taught the Spaniards the Spanish martial art, the Christian martial art that they drove the Muslims out of Spain with in the Reconquista.
Interesting.
So people talk about the conquistadors. The conquistadors were just the soldiers that fought the Muslims, and they needed to go somewhere else to fight.
Right.
So they became conquistadors. So in Negros Occidental was the first island they conquered in the Philippines. They created an army and conquered all the rest of the Philippines. So the only place I believe you can still really learn traditional Western martial art is in Negros Occidental. The whole thing was preserved there. And there's a movement in the historical European martial arts movement to resurrect these fighting systems, because we had our own martial arts.
Interesting.
And there were books written, like the famous book is Talhafer's book. He wrote a book in the 1400s. He was a Swabian weapons master, and he wrote a really with unusually good illustrations and explanations. And so people will read these books and try to resurrect these methods.
Yeah.
And my view is you can't resurrect a physical culture from a book.
Yeah.
It would be like looking at a book on gymnastics and then trying to figure out how did you train to do a handstand, or what did you do to try to get where you could do a planche. You can't get that from a book. Physical cultures are passed from person to person.
Yeah, it's more oral tradition and like in person.
Yeah, and you have to see it and experience it. And in fact, I can tell you this from training Marines, for years in this stuff. You never train two people the same way. If a guy's 5'5" and super fast, and the other guy's 6'3" and slow as Christmas, You're not going to train them the same way. You're going to train them with different methods.
Exactly.
Because they got to survive. You got to survive.
Yeah.
So the tradition isn't even passed down the same way to people, right? It's different. So so what happens is I go around to these HEMA groups all the time and I just beat the crap out of them because I not because they're far athletically superior to me.
Yeah.
It's just that the methods they're using aren't correct. There's a thing in the in the German systems called the crooked cut, Rumpa. And they've totally misinterpreted what that is, right? It exists in the Spanish systems as the florete,
Yeah.
and they've done it completely wrong. And that's because you can't learn it from a book online.
Yeah. Right.
So I believe that's actually true of living a faith. It can't all be learned from a book.
Interesting.
That it's passed on from the apostles personally. Jesus personally passed on the gifts to the apostles, and they personally passed that on to other people. Right? It's something that's passed on personally from person to person. And so one of the big differences between us and Roman Catholicism is that we have more of a hospital metaphor for the church rather than a judgment or legal metaphor for the church.
Interesting.
So the emphasis is on spiritually healing yourself so that you can stand in the presence of God. Because we think hell is actually simply being unable to suffer God's presence. It will just be hell for some people and it'll be joyous for others.
Interesting.
And so how do you do that? Well, it comes from the dogmas of the church, which are derived from the teachings of the apostles. That's what dogmas are.
Yeah.
But we think of them as medicines. So the dogmas should not be strictly applied to all people in the same way, just in the same way that you could give one person a medicine, it might kill them. Another person, it might heal them.
Right.
People have different diseases,
right,
you could say.
And genetics too.
Which is why we rejected kind of I reject. I'm talking about me personally. Like, I'm not a theologian.
Yeah.
In some ways, I kind of reject academic theology. I don't think it's going to help save you.
Yeah.
Most of the saints knew nothing about academic theology. I do respect academic theologians. I watch every episode of Jay Dyer. I love this stuff.
Right. Yeah, he's on it.
Yeah, I'm not a person that does academic theology. I'm just concerned with getting to heaven.
Right.
And so one of the things about Orthodox attraction is it's practical. And let me just give you an example of how these dogmas work. So I have a father confessor. So a father confessor in Orthodoxy is someone who takes a lifetime confession from you and sees the patterns in your sinning. And he basically is a doctor he says, hey, you have these kinds of proclivities to sin, right? So I remember confessing one time, I'm at work and there's this woman there. I'm having carnal thoughts about this woman, and it's becoming a huge problem for me.
Right.
And my father confessor just looked at me with this grave look and he said, the wages of sin are death. And he said, from now on, whenever you have these urges, I want you to step out of the building. I want you to say 12 Our Fathers and do a full prostration on the ground. Put your forehead on the ground, do a full prostration. I did this for a month. I came back for confession. And I said, man, this really worked. Was this like some special Orthodox thing against carnal lust or whatever? And he goes, no, man, I just wanted to get your mind off of her for a while. And I knew that if I got your mind off of her and made you do a push-up, you'd forget about it.
Very practical.
It's very practical. It's like, how do you deal with lust? You just have to get yourself to move on from it.
Yeah.
Don't fight it. Just move on. Don't think about it. Right.
Yeah.
So Orthodoxy is very practical like this. Whereas, a Roman Catholic confessor would probably give you a penance and have you say certain prayers, and it would be there's a specific formula they follow for that.
Right.
If you were to confess that to a Protestant preacher, because Protestants mostly do confess to one another. It's one of the great things actually about Protestantism is they confess to one another. I like that. And they would give you some legalistic explanation about why it's immoral and you must abstain and and this kind of thing. Whereas in Orthodoxy, it's just like we're just going to get you past this and we're going to move you past it. Like, it's very, very practical.
That's awesome.
There's no theology involved with that. It's just sanctifying you. Right? It's helping you stay clean. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that was the first thing that attracted me to Orthodoxy, was just how practical it was. You know, I
Right.
could live in a fallen world, and I could look at people not as these terrible sinners and reprobates that I should condemn, or that I should assume God has condemned.
Yeah.
But instead, I could look at them as people who were recovering from a terrible illness and had never been shown the cure.
Right. And have different
And
levels
it
of it.
gave me an ability to have mercy for people that I didn't have before, you know? And
That's
that
awesome.
feeling of it was good, but it was less the feeling of mercy.
Yeah.
It was knowing that it was kind of the same experience I had when I eventually had children. You know, when you have children
Yeah.
and your kid gets 1 year old and they're walking and things, and then, you know, you're outside and some guy smarts off to you and you think, I'm going to go punch that guy. I'm going to punch his lights out.
Right.
And then what happens is you look at him and you go, he was somebody's kid.
Right.
He was somebody's kid, man. And just like that monk who had been raped all of his life and then got down to one drink, you don't know where people have been, man. You know? So it gives you a different way of thinking about what it means to be kind to people, and how, just like a doctor sometimes has to be very strict with you,
Right.
and may even mean to you, and may even have to inflict pain on you, serious pain on you, to
Right.
be good to you. It gives you a completely different moral way of thinking about it. And Orthodoxy gave me that, and no, other branches of Christianity did not give me that. The other thing was I basically accepted the apostolic view of the church.
Yeah.
So, for example, let's just look at biblical interpretation.
Yeah.
So I brought up this HEMA thing, and that's where I was going with this. So, you know, you can't resurrect a physical culture from a book. Well, I think of Christianity as a physical culture.
Yeah.
Right? It's a culture that trains the will, it trains the mind, and it trains the body, all three, because the soul is not separate from the body.
Right.
We are going to be bodily resurrected. The soul and the body are together always.
Yeah.
Right? There's no separation between the soul and the body. The soul and the body are somehow the same thing. When we talk about soul or body, we're talking about different aspects of the same thing.
Right.
Right? The mind is not separate from the body. It's an aspect of the person, of a human person. And this idea of a human person is absolutely unique to Christianity. There's no concept like this anywhere else until Christianity arrives. The idea of a personhood and the importance of personhood,
Yeah.
that came from the doctrine of the Trinity, right? So you look at like biblical interpretation, and people will make arguments from different hermeneutics from the Bible, and that's how you get all these different sects. That's how they argue against Orthodoxy or Roman Catholicism, or Armenians argue with Calvinists or Methodists or whatever.
Right.
So they do all this, but here's the way I thought about it. I don't criticize other people. I just say what I think and what I believe. You know, I don't do debate. I don't think debate's super helpful for Christians. We should love one another and engage in dialectic if possible, rather than
Right.
than debate. So the way I came at this was like this. The question then is not really what the Bible says, because the texts of the Bible could be read, you know, millions of ways.
Right.
And we
With
know this, we
exegesis.
can just observe this. Yeah, we can just observe this. Like, there's whole sects of Christianity that are split over these different interpretations.
Right.
So the question becomes then, what's the authoritative interpretation of the Bible?
Exactly.
Okay, and it's the interpretation that we should be talking about, not the text.
Right.
Some interpretations could be wrong. So we know some of these interpretations are actually contradictory. So we know there are wrong interpretations in major denominations in Protestantism.
Right.
So the question then becomes, who can tell us what the right interpretation is? Okay. So the Roman Catholic answer to that was the magisterium is the one who tells us what the right interpretation is.
Yeah.
And oh, by the way, that could change over time, because we believe in the idea of the development of doctrine. Somehow the Pope gets more knowledge about God than we had before, and that could change our interpretations.
Right.
Protestants will rejecting that, and I think rightly rejecting that.
Yeah.
Said, well, we're gonna base this on individual interpretations, and we're gonna base it purely on higher textual analysis. And one of the outcomes of that is that's exactly what led to postmodernism. A lot of people don't know this, but
Interesting.
postmodernism began by copying the Protestant way of reading the Bible. That's what the early postmodernists were studying. What happens when the Bible is a commentary upon itself? When there's no author, you don't consult the author's intentions,
Yeah.
you don't consult anything outside of the text, then the text becomes a commentary on itself. As Calvin said, the short sentences interpret the long sentences, right? It becomes a commentary on itself. That's
Right.
exactly what postmodernism is. Postmodernism is when the author collapses into nothingness and a text simply becomes a commentary upon itself. And that's how they read texts.
Yeah.
That's what, when they talk about criticism, like literary criticism, that's what they mean. It actually came from the hermeneutic doctrines that were developed by Protestants in the Reformation. That's where they got it. So,
That is,
and what this does is it submerges the question of the interpretation.
right.
Right? Where's the interpretation? So the Orthodox position on this is that there is a correct interpretation, and it doesn't develop, it doesn't change in any way.
Static. Yeah.
Because the apostles gave the complete interpretation to the church.
Yeah.
And what we call holy tradition, there's often a distinction that Protestants make, and even Roman Catholics make, between tradition and scripture. We don't make such a distinction, right? When scripture was just a mechanism for the apostles to transmit a portion of tradition to the practices of the church.
Yeah.
And so when we ask what is the right interpretation of the Bible, we have to go to what I believe are the intentions of the authors. That's how we read all other texts. If your wife puts a note on the refrigerator and says, I'm leaving today.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Well, let's say it's you have to make inferences to her intentions. Does that mean she's divorcing you today?
Right.
Does that mean she's leaving to go see her mother up in New York today? Does that mean that she's leaving to go to the grocery store? Like
Right.
that you make inferences from her intentions, right?
Yeah.
What we call holy tradition orthodoxy is really those holy intentions that give us the right interpretation of scripture.
Yeah.
And
Which would
we
need to be
think that
backed up,
only people,
like
yeah,
historically, right? Like the historical context, which is seemingly lost in Protestantism. There's like zero historical context. You would need that,
Yes.
though, to help understand what the intentions were. You'd need to know what was going on at the time to be able to better read into it.
yeah. And what's interesting is we had churches, the canon of the Bible wasn't really fixed until you get into the 700s, right?
Yeah.
And most of the churches, even the sees, didn't have all of the texts. But we had right-believing Christians at Antioch, where Peter founded, that's where we say with Roman Catholics, like Antioch probably has a better claim to being the see of Peter than Rome. But anyway,
Right.
you had Antioch, you had the church at Ephesus, you had the church at Thessaloniki for Thessalonians. The church at Thessaloniki is still there. You can go there. They have the chair that they built for Paul to preach out of, because
Yeah.
Paul couldn't stand up a lot. So he preached out of a stone chair, and it's still there. You can go see it.
That's amazing.
So what happened was they went to the episcopos, the bishops in Thessaloniki and Ephesus and Antioch, and they said, we have all these texts. Some of them seem right, some of them don't. Which ones accord with what was taught what did Peter teach at Antioch?
Right.
Because they knew the interpretations that Peter had of the writings, because he taught them to them and taught physical practices to them. The liturgy was taught as a physical practice. It wasn't just taught, as something that you read or whatever. Like a lot of Protestants will see the liturgy and they think of it as responsive reading. Priest says something, then we say something, and it's not what it is.
Right.
It's not at all. In fact, it's not at all that. The question is not what does the Bible say, but who has the right interpretation and how do we determine what it is?
Right.
And I claim that at least for me, I don't believe it's possible to determine what the correct interpretation of the Bible is from hermeneutics alone.
Yeah.
From higher criticism alone. It requires knowledge of the intentions of the authors and the practices that they passed down unbroken from their time.
Right. And that categorically stretches across the board what you would also need in terms of like sources that would help illuminate what the intentions and interpretations would be.
So we have the Holy Fathers, right? You have the fathers before the Nicene Council, the fathers after the Nicene Council is a natural division of the Holy Fathers. And then you had the councils, which united all the bishops in the world at that time to agree on these interpretations.
Yeah.
That's what the councils are. They're just agreements on biblical interpretations. And for us, these councils are binding, and they represent the true understanding of what the apostles meant.
Yeah.
And it sort of, just makes sense, right? If you wanted to know something about the ancient farming practices in, I don't know, let's just pick someplace like Tunisia or whatever.
Yeah. Right.
And they're doing the same practices today, you would just go there and ask them.
Yeah.
Let's go look at it. Let's go watch them do it. Our fathers have always taught us how to irrigate crops like this. This kind of thing.
Yeah.
So that's what we mean by tradition.
Well, I'd listened in, and it's funny because I believe Joel Webben is Reformed, and I don't want to say anything. He might be different, but he had a great episode on it, which I thought was largely very defeating towards a more foundational Protestant argument. But he was going heavily into the oral tradition aspect of it. And you can see this commonly in the Bible because Jesus will say, "Truly I tell you." This is a very common phrase that he uses. And it's a reference because a lot of the other rabbis would say, they'd refer to other rabbinical fathers. They'd refer to like Rabbi, he says, but that it obviously pissed them off because Jesus is going, "I don't need them guys. I'm telling you. Yeah, it's me saying this." And you have obviously, as you laid out, right, all the way until 700, and you have this massive portion of time where there is no static set Bible as we have come to understand it in modern era. And that's like one of the biggest questions that I kind of had to reconcile with, which was ultimately that means like, I don't think that God abandoned people for, 400, 300 years and they all just went to hell because there wasn't a Bible that was printed, in great text times New Roman. So that I had to reckon then that you can ultimately be saved without a Bible. So then that by itself automatically like demotes the singular kind of importance of the Bible, and it pulls it down to like, so then what else is relevant? That brings in oral tradition. That would bring in like exactly what you had said, right? This kind of long known history. Practice. Yeah. Right. Practices, history. Exactly. And
and the interesting thing about this, we Orthodox consider the Bible the highest expression of tradition.
Interesting.
It's not like tradition is separate from the Bible. The Bible's the highest expression of the tradition. That's, because it was through the interpretive apparatus that was taught by the apostles that they selected the books to begin with.
Right.
And so that you can't get around this issue of that. What we're talking about are interpretations of the text, and what is the best way and who is the best person to interpret that text.
Right.
And I claim that that can't be done merely through textual criticism alone, textual understandings alone.
Exactly.
That it requires an understanding of physical practices and oral practices. I'll give you an example. There's, Protestants often have a lot of trouble with the icons in Orthodox churches.
Right.
And the assumptions, because the Reformation happened after the printing press, right?
Right.
But
1600.
before the printing press, like 0.01% of the population could read or write.
Yeah.
So you have a situation where not even 1% of the Christian world could even read the Bible.
Right.
And yet we have all these saints and we have all these churches.
Right.
Okay. How can that possibly be? Well, one of the things is the icons basically made churches into picture Bible books for people who couldn't read.
Interesting.
Right. So there's a traditional icon that goes over the narthex entrance, into the nave in Orthodox churches, and it's the expulsion from the Garden of Eden. You're like,
okay,
why would the expulsion from the Garden of Eden be above the door where you're entering into the church?
Right. Yeah. Right.
You're like, why is that? Why did the church do that? Well, for a lot of reasons, that we have a different understanding of the expulsion. We believe that what the Protestants call the curses were actually blessings, because the alternative was death. So you see Peter actually throwing them out with this hand sign, which is the name of Jesus.
Yeah.
It's the initials of Jesus written with your hands. Jesus Christos. It's the initials of Jesus.
Oh, that's
And
awesome.
he's expelling them in the name of Jesus so that they don't die. And they're given the opportunity later through Jesus for eternal life. So it's saying, hey, the church, though you've been expelled, the church is still giving you the opportunity for eternal life. You know, that's the meaning of that icon, and that theological concept can be learned through a picture,
Yeah.
right? And that's what icons are. The icon painters don't even say that they paint icons, they say they write them. They're a picture language that developed for people who couldn't read.
Yeah.
And so you could teach theology or the ideas of the Bible in ways that people could remember who couldn't read.
Right. Visually be able to print it on themselves.
Yeah. So that's another thing. Like, so how did all these illiterate people learn and follow the Christian faith so accurately over these unchangingly for,
Right.
So we had the Great Schism, you know, in 1050 or whatever. We had 1,000 years where people faithfully followed the same practices. How did that happen when they couldn't read the Bible?
Right.
And the answer was they were following the practices of the church. And the practices teach you how to live as a Christian.
Right. And over time, as you're absorbing in the physical presence, you know, you will learn, right? It's like that same thing what you had said earlier, you know, as a son with his father, you learn through the experience and understanding through the natural consequences and what goes on like that.
Yeah, that's right.
I wanted to say too, we kind of had time. We're at the 2-hour mark. I wanted to say, yeah, it flew by. I appreciate it very much. So thank you very much on that. I wanted to say, is there anything else that you wanted to bring up? You know, I got extra time if you wanted to go to a different topic.
Well, I mean, I think the most pressing issue of our time, like I said, is this propaganda resistance.
Yeah.
And let me ask you a question. You know, a lot of people push me to do a podcast, you know, and
yeah,
it's like me leading these democratic movements to change laws in Texas and, like, you know, shutting down these gender clinics. Like, just temperamentally, man, I'm not really a guy that's like that should lead democratic movements.
Yeah.
It just fell on me, and you know, I'm not going to let my son get killed, right?
Right.
It just fell on me. Like, I thought maybe a podcast oriented on propaganda resistance, or what do you think, or what does your audience think? If I did a podcast, what should I do with it? How would it be different or more valuable that's not being done? Because you have an excellent podcast. Like, how do I add value to that? Jay Dyer is like the best on Orthodoxy. You know, you've got all these great people doing great things.
Yeah.
Is there something missing that I should do or not? Or maybe I shouldn't do it, you know? But I get a lot of people asking me to do it. So I take it seriously. I think they're sincere.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Well, like I had said, you know, you posed this kind of to me a little bit ago too, in the green room. And I think for one, there's always an element of the temperament. Like, people, even if you're saying close or even the exact same thing as somebody else, people kind of choose the temperament of the person I think that they are most alike. So there's also, you could just gain an audience because you could have a different temperament than the majority of people in the space, which I think you do a bit. You know, I don't think you're nearly as reactive as a lot of some of these other guys are. And I think you could probably go a lot deeper into topics. I would probably pin where your podcast could go would be in the same light as like somebody like Stone Choir. That is like extremely informative and expansive, where it's like that show is almost a resource more than it is entertainment.
Like deep dives is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay.
Definitely. Okay. Because and they kind of did it well because they did it with Christianity, where there are a lot of deep dives that have, you know, modern applications for, you know, especially their series on like MLK. A lot of people, you know, just lighting him up about like how heretical he was, things that people didn't know about him. And I thought that was a fantastic episode. I guess if I had a second suggestion, you know, for me, it took a lot of thinking because I have been in and out of this for like the last 2 years. And when I came back to it and I started doing really well with the channel, I was about a few months ago, I thought along the lines as I was watching an Asmongold video actually when this had happened. And I realized you like Asmongold, yeah. He's fun.
I watch everything he does, yeah.
Really? No, yeah, he's hilarious. Yeah. I realized as he was reacting to a lot of these different videos that conservatives don't make videos that he would ever react to. You know, it's largely a lot of left-wing people. So then I kind of got the idea in my head. I was like, I need to not worry about doing this talking head reactive stuff. I need to actually learn how to edit videos and make like actual kind of like, productions inside videos that would look like somebody who's like an August Duck or any of these guys who have millions of followers who are like largely not left leaning really, but they're just the normative liberal. They are exactly what the government created them to be. And so that's why I kind of thought, maybe I can do that, but in a conservative light, and it's done well. I will ultimately think you definitely should. It's a hard kind of fierce competition, I think, with as many voices, as many people are in it. But
yeah, and it's a lot of work. It really is a lot of work.
It is.
So,
but I think quality shines through. And I think, especially because you already have you have a large following on X, I think you would easily, just off the back of that, you'd probably shoot through. I mean, if you got to think about it, who listens to Kyle Serafin's podcast? I mean, feds. I mean, that you would probably pull people from audiences otherwise who were listening to somebody else, and you just take it up a notch. Because for one, you're real. 2, you're not owned. And 3, being anti-woman, anti-multiculturalism, and anti-JQ is pretty hot right now. So I feel like it's probably the best time than ever to start doing it.
Got it. Oh, that's good advice. I'll think deep dives could work for me. Yeah, that could work.
Yeah, and then maybe you could probably do it in a production sense of even if it wasn't like a documentary, but if it was like kind of like Martyr Made, his is like once a month he releases like a podcast, but people rush to it because they know he puts like a lot of effort into doing those single episodes. Yeah. That's kind of my perspective. I have Tix Bummer here says that you bring knowledge and life experience along with a very unique perspective. But I'm assuming most people just think you're very unique compared to the average right winger. And I think that by itself, on its ethos, it's enough that probably carry you a good bit. In my opinion, I would say.
If I just feel like I just look at the world as it is, I don't know. It's interesting.
I know. Well, that's what a lot of people can't do.
I'll feel that way, though. Right? I'll think we're seeing as it is.
Right. And that's where I'm at, being very pragmatic. And it's probably what largely shook me a lot into these bit more radical positions was everyone else saying, don't believe your lying eyes. And there's only so much you're willing to take of that before you're like, okay, dude, someone's lying to me.
That's right. That's exactly right. Remember when people used to tell us all the time that there's no illegal aliens voting in elections. There's no evidence of it anywhere. Right. And you're just like, I've been in the voting lines. Like, I have witnessed it.
Right.
You're telling me just to ignore this? That's essentially what's happened.
Right. Well, exactly. And I mean, I go to it from the extent of like, I live in a major urban area, so I just go outside. Yeah, that's right. They're everywhere. They weren't here 3 years ago.
Yeah. I just had a talk today with a normie conservative who asked me, I have a breakfast I do every Thursday morning with normies in my county. And it's a local politic thing.
Okay.
And he asked me, he's like, it's weird, Jeff. Like, I know you're not anti-Semitic, but what is this anti-Israel stuff? And I said, well, I'm not anti-Israel. I don't know what you're talking about. I said, I'm even in favor in some cases of even arming Israel. Like, what are you talking about? He goes, what? I'm like, yeah, I think we should do balance of power politics in the Middle East. I think we should keep Iran and Israel fighting each other so we don't have to fight for anybody. Just balance them off one another. And I said, and that sounds brilliant, or it sounds crazy to you. That was the policy Henry Kissinger and Zbigniew Brzezinski pursued for 50 years in this country. That was our policy in the Middle East, because we kept the balance of power and we kept everybody fighting each other, so we don't have to go fight them. Right? I said, that's what I want to do. Yeah, that's what I want to do. I said, I don't think that's anti-Israel. I said, I think Israel often acts that are not in our national interest. And he goes, what? And I'm like, you don't know that they gave nuclear weapons to Pakistan? You don't know that they sold an F-16 illegally to China so they could copy our stealth technology because Israel's playing balance of power politics between America and China? You didn't know that? Right. You didn't know that two members of AIPAC were prosecuted for espionage? You don't know about this? And he's like, I had no idea. I said, yeah, I mean, if you just look objectively at the facts, you cannot conclude that Israel is our best ally.
Right.
Right. And so I'm not saying do anything to Israel bad. I'm just saying be realistic about your relationship with them. That's all I'm saying.
Right.
And he walked away kind of like puzzled because he couldn't apply these categories that he wanted to apply,
Because the framing that's been given to him is Muslims bad, the Jews good.
Yeah, and if you anti-Zionism, anti-Israel means you hate Jews.
Right. Right.
You know, and I even told him, I was like, you know that there's lots of Jews in Iran. Actually, the richest people in Iran are Jews. I don't know if you know that. And he's like, what? And he looked that up. He didn't believe that. And
Yeah.
and he was like, what? I'm like, yeah, Orthodox Jews are not Zionists, man, because Zionists were atheists.
Yeah.
The guys that created the Zionist movement were communists and they were atheists.
Right.
And so the Orthodox Jews turned against them in the very beginning because they knew that it was going to secularize their religion.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm like, so I said, I hate to break it to you, brother, but the Orthodox Jews agree with me, not you.
That's funny. And most people don't even know, like right now, I think the Orthodox are trying to fight off because majority of Orthodox in Israel, they get the waiver to not have to go into the military. And
Right.
I think as of their polling numbers are down. So I believe Netanyahu is pushing to selectively void that waiver for a few years.
Right.
And they're up in arms. So there's so
Right.
much of that history people don't know, and especially as it pertains to the country.
There's a church I go to in Carrollton, and it's a suburb of Dallas here, and it's a church just full of elderly Palestinian people who are all Christians who were driven out of the Holy Lands by the Jews. You know, I talked to one guy who's a physicist, and when he was a boy, they came into his house and said, in the morning, and said, we're going to come back at noon, and if you're still here, we'll kill all of you. And so his family had to leave. And he still remembers that to this day. Like,
Yeah.
I don't think people realize that the founding of Israel involved the ethnic cleansing of all Christians from the lands.
Right.
And they did that before they cleansed any of the Muslims.
Right.
You
And
know? So there's like a whole history there that people aren't aware of. But I'm a realist in international politics. I absolutely expect Israel to behave that way. Nation states behave in such a way as to achieve regional hegemony.
right.
And Israel has to physically expand its borders to attain regional hegemony. So I'm not sitting here making moral judgments about it. This is just how nation states behave, right?
Right.
What I decry is the application of these moral categories to Israel, both, you know, which are totally unrealistic. Like
Right.
they've never done anything like arm a radical Muslim country with nuclear weapons. They stole their nuclear material from the United States.
Yeah.
You know, they sold our secrets to China. Right now, they're arming Salafi Islamists in Azerbaijan to fight a war against Christian Armenia. Right now, they're doing that. There's a big, huge Mossad complex in Azerbaijan, and they run all the drone ops for these Muslims. So that's why Israel's not in some existential war against Islam, or they wouldn't be supporting Muslims in Azerbaijan, right? So there's all these weird moral categories. I just look at the world from an offensive realist point of view.
Yeah.
And nation states, the relations of nation states are like the relationships of people in prison. You know, if you're in prison, what's the best strategy? Be the biggest, baddest dude in the prison that can kill anybody, anytime, anywhere,
Right.
and you're going to be safe.
Right.
What's the next best?
Allies.
Well, you need to be allied to a guy like that.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
That's how the world works. You can apply any moral category you want. Israel's acting rationally in its self-interest. Iran is acting rationally in its self-interest. But I don't believe America is acting rationally in its self-interest.
No. And that's the part that I think that bothers most people.
Yeah, it bothers a lot of people. I think that's what's driving young men to the right.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And I think it's the clear overt lying and clear like framing constantly, you know, of one being good. And I think that's kind of where we're at now, and hopefully we'll get rid of it with the next generation. If you look at some of the polling, it's that people are done with it. You know, people are done with their futures and geopolitics being singularly tied to this country. And I mean, and you probably saw that story too. What's his name? Tom Alexandrovich, right? Like, you know, it's a federal sting operation. They arrest 8 people. He's the one Israeli Jew, and then also being prosecuted by an Israeli born Jew. And then he's in Israel now and not being prosecuted by the United States. It's just, you can see it over and over and over again. And I think you're exactly right. Like, they're driving their own demise by not figuring out a better way to play the propaganda, because people are seeing through it like crazy.
Well, there's no surprise, right? There's historical precedent for this. You know, if you've had 109 divorces, it's probably you.
Right. Yeah. You're telling me I got kicked out of 109 gyms and it was every gym's fault, not mine.
Yeah.
I think that's probably a great way to end the show.
And it basically this is what it comes down to, right? It's like, the the way powerful people, billionaires, people in the billionaire class,
Yeah.
they hear something like America First, and what they hear are the Cossack hoofbeats in the background and the pogroms in the Russian Empire.
Right.
That's what they hear
Right.
when they hear America First, right? And you're like, no, dude, like all we want is the citizens to be put first. That's all we want.
Yeah.
And like I get criticized all the time, because I don't buy into this libertarian free market concept of economics. And so I'm for political economy, what we call today national economy instead
Right.
of free markets. And so I think, actually the economy should be run for American citizens, yes, but also first and foremost to hurt our enemies too.
Right.
And we don't do that either.
No,
Yeah.
this kind of hit me hard. I can't remember who had a good tweet about this, but basically kind of outlining like, a globalist system, or a capitalist system, if it has the ability to reach globally, will reach globally because it's going to act in what is the most best free market decision. They're going to hire the cheapest labor. They're going to turn the highest profit margin they can, all at the cost at generally whatever. And largely it's Americans. And you can see that with like the H-1B visas and the work program. And that just reminded me, that was the one big thing that we didn't talk about. I'll just ask you real quick.
Oh, sure. Okay.
The U.S. hidden jobs aspect. Now I saw this was it's a website, I believe, that started up.
Love those guys. Yeah.
Because the requirement for an American job to be eligible for an H-1B visa or the visa program in general, it has to have been posted to an American like job posting first. And is it that they need an American to apply, or that it goes so long that American doesn't apply, they can then shift it to?
Apply. Their goal is to get no American to apply for the job. That's their goal.
Interesting. So if the American does apply, they have to hire them.
Yeah, I'll tell you what I caught HR doing. This is at Citibank, here in Irving, Texas. I walked by HR one time and I saw this lady. I'm not making this up. She was posting internal job postings on a wall, and then they would put a corkboard on top of it so you wouldn't see them.
You're who I saw it from. Okay, that story blew me away.
That's literally what they were doing. And I got two of them fired, but like that's what they were doing in order to justify bringing in H-1Bs. There's two interesting things you can look at here if you're interested in going down the rabbit hole here. One is to do a Google search for a guy named Norm Matloff. Norm Matloff, he's passed away now. But he was fighting H-1B back in the 80s, man. This guy spent like 30 years fighting against H-1B. And so there's a lot of material out there that he's done, and he's got all of the statistics behind it. They've known all this stuff since the 80s that this was being abused. They knew everything about it. Second thing is look at some of Eric Weinstein's stuff, because Eric Weinstein was present in the late 80s and early 90s. In physics departments, where the government was specifically creating alternative employment visas to depress the wages of scientists, because their economic projections said that physicists and computer scientists were going to make in excess of $350K a year, and they said it's too much. So they put in place programs to depress the wages of engineers, physicists, and computer scientists. This is all an intentional program to do this, and they wrote papers about it. Look for Eric Weinstein's stuff on that, about how the government intentionally depressed the wages of scientists. And when you do that, of course, you decrease participation in science.
Right.
And that's where you wind up with an innovation problem in the United States. Okay. So this was all done intentionally, and it shows something that Manker Olson called a problem with the logic of collective action. That it's possible, because of the free rider problem, to have actions that benefit the collective and are bad for the individuals, and situations where it's good for the individuals but bad for the collective. The assumptions of most modern economic systems, neoclassical, Austrian, free market, even modern monetary theory, they all assume that the sum total of all individual goods equals the collective good. And that's not true. And there's a firm mathematical proof of this. It's not true because of the free rider problem. And so you can have situations where people are pursuing an individual capitalistic good at the expense of everybody else. I don't even believe in price equilibrium theory anymore. I think Bamry and Gamel's arguments on that are absolutely decisive. In a floating currency system, there can be multiple price equilibria for a product. And I think China's figured that out, and they set the value of their currency to achieve the price equilibria for products that benefits them and hurts us.
That's wild. And,
yeah.
And I think the overall, the comprehensive here is that's a hard sell to the average normie American to change an economic system. That's, because if you think of what's maybe a word that's more closely associated with patriotism in the American sense than capitalism. Right. That is a very strongly rooted thing. But I do think that the argument though laid out, which is like, I'm more of a nationalist and I'm a globalist. So that would imply I would be anti a capitalist system, because that would inevitably act against my own interests at a certain point in time, if not immediately.
That's right.
Well, and I think that's probably a great way to.
There's a lot of obvious examples of this. Like, no nation has ever industrialized without a strong tariff. That's a historical fact.
Yeah.
No nation. Say it again. No nation has ever industrialized without a heavy tariff.
Yeah.
And that's not predicted by free market economics. Actually, the opposite is predicted. So it's not true. And China proves that you can have a very flourishing economy with no free trade at all. There's no free trade in Canada.
Yeah, right. A complete controlled system, basically mimicking basically everybody else trying to play ball.
Because everybody said you have to have political freedom and you have to have free markets in order to have a successful capitalist society. And China shows that you don't need either one of those.
Right, exactly. Especially if you have enough control, you can just force it. You can make things be what you want them to be. And that's my part of it. But thank you very much, Jeff. This has been,
it's been a pleasure.
An amazing interview. I would love to be able to do it again.
Yes, do some time.
Hopefully this didn't get me shadow banned. I know people don't like you at the highest levels. So hopefully this don't get me shadow banned at all. But I appreciated it very much. I do have your link to your X and your website in the description below. So anybody who wants to follow him, definitely reach out to him, subscribe to him there. He puts out great work. So take it from me. I've followed him for a long time. And if there's anything that you want to shout out yourself.
Yeah. Look, I think people, first of all, should follow you, because I've been following you and I have the notifications turned on for you and I see everything you do.
I appreciate it.
But I would like, the one last thing I would just say with people is, when you're on X, you're on social media, right? Really start thinking about sharing content from right-wing creators, because the algorithms, whether you're on Meta, Instagram, X, or whatever, they don't really weight likes very highly, So that's one of the reasons you've noticed I share a lot of your content. Yeah. Okay. Sharing is what they weight. If you share content, especially if you comment on it when you share it, you really help people. So the last thing I would like to say is, let's all share Atlas Thug's content, and let's get his numbers up.
Well, I appreciate that very much. Thank you. And I'll do the same. And it's funny because I also have your post notifications turned on too. So I wish I was better at liking everything, because you do put out some great work.
Thanks, man.
And everyone's saying thank you in the chat as well. And definitely share this stream. And without further ado, Christ is King, as always. And if I always say my normal line at the end, it would be deport Cash Patel, put Pam Bondi back behind the kitchen sink, and hopefully we can, with a slimmer of hope, save this country. Thank you once again, Jeff. I do appreciate it. What's good, everybody? This is Atlas Thug. As much as we have, it's currently a media blackout right now. It's about a 10-minute video here. Get the libertarians out of this party, dude. Part of a new series I'm going to be running called Bot or Not.
I grew up as a white man, and you're the exact opposite,
It's time we have a difficult conversation about race.
40 IQ points it needs to think about what is being told to you.
Most people are just blatantly apathetic to what goes on around them, their surroundings, let alone this blatant.
trans woman's penis make you gay?
Can I define to answer that comment?
The dating market is for men your age.
I'm not a misogynist. I'm a sexist.
Right. Like for example, like as a white man, I can go out and I could go right here in Columbus and scream the N-word as loud as I wanted to because I have that privilege. Those who would sacrifice a little freedom for a little convenience serves neither.
Titan says, Browns should be for whites. We were just trying to help them run a better empire.
Hey, truth.
But she's she's like, stock market. She's like, bro, like, I can't even buy a fucking house. Like,
And, it probably doesn't help that half the comments are, how are you not banned on YouTube? Man, how is this guy? How's this guy not banned on YouTube? It's like, yeah, I'm sure YouTube probably picks up on those things. And they're probably wondering why so many people are saying that,
and all these top brass pundits who have some kind of association or relationship with Epstein, it's getting to the point where you got to think like I'm about to go look at my residential history and be like, did I live next to Epstein for like some time? Like, man, everyone on this planet must have some relation to Epstein. And then you go, oh, actually, no. This is because the administration is all wrapped in together with it themselves.
and I said this maybe about a year ago, what if Christianity wasn't in such a cucked position that what if Andrew Tate, like Tristan, would have went to a Christian position? Fell for it again award, #1 right here. And you know what? I can't even make fun of the audience because I fell for it too. And that's probably what I'm most pissed about. He's huffing some extreme copium. Oh yeah, sister, you definitely owned him. Hey, can I see you after tonight? It's like that's that's what you're competing up against because or bad jacketing him and calling him a weird little gay.
Is this like alt-right Wolf's husband? What am I listening to?
Okay, stop it. This guy's gonna get into statistics, stuff like that.
Oh no, statistics. Not on the show. We don't do statistics.